Oh, hello everyone. No, everyone's so excited to see each other because we haven't seen each other in like a year. It's also very exciting to see such a full room. All right. Wow, that happened quick. All right. Clinicians, researchers, industry partners, and cherished families. Welcome to the Cute Syndrome Foundation's 10th annual SCN8A Clinician, Researcher, and Family Gathering. My name is Kacie Craig, and I am the Executive Director for the Cute Syndrome Foundation, but most importantly, I am the mother to SCN8A warrior Stella. 10 years. Wow. 10 years. That's a long time for anyone, but for a nonprofit, for a very such small community, that's a really long time. It is truly remarkable to reflect on how far we've come since the very first gathering. While this milestone predates my time with TCSF, no one understands this journey better than the one who started it all, TCSF's founder and president, Hilary Savoie. Hilary has been here since day one, pouring her heart and her soul into this mission, and it's because of her vision that we stand here today. I would now like to introduce Hilary Savoie to the stage as we reflect on the last 10 years.
Hi, everyone. Normally, when I get up here to talk, I'm armed with notes that tell me every word. But tonight, I wanted to take an opportunity to just speak from the heart. I'm kind of completely overwhelmed seeing this room and thinking about that number 10. 10 years is, as Kacie said, a really long time. It's a lot of work, a lot of people, a lot of love. And I wanted to spend a moment to talk about how we started, why we started, and what it all means. In the beginning, for this event, a little over 10 years ago when we started planning it, there were a couple of elements. There was the amazing work that Michael Hammer had done around his daughter Shay that allowed us to even be a community. There was a woman named Julianne Bradish, who some of you might not know, who had a Facebook group that allowed a handful of families to find each other and feel a little bit less alone. And there was me, who had a foundation that needed some direction in many ways. And we coalesced around the idea of having a meeting where, Julianne and I were going to research meetings and learning about what was happening in the SCN8A space, and we wanted to be sure that the families, you in this room, the most important people in this room, knew what was happening in that space, that you understood what the implications of that research were, what it meant for your families, what it meant for the way you made decisions about your children. We wanted you to be able to access that research because we felt that that would directly affect the care that you gave your children. It would arm you to take better care of your children. And it would make you feel less alone. It would help you feel hopeful in ways that were measured appropriately. It would help you know where you could slot in your information and help drive that research. And in this very vague idea, we knew that an engaged community, a community that was ready to act, would be ready to respond to the call for this thing called a clinical trial, which seemed like a pipe dream. I believe that as the direct result of the amazing work of the people in this community, and there are many people who work in this community. And these types of meetings where families are empowered to lean in, we are, I think, rather notoriously among the rare epilepsies, one of the most engaged communities that you can find. You all answer the call every time. Every time someone says, fill in your information. Every time Shelley says, hey guys, sign up for this. You answer the call. And that makes an incredible difference. And everyone in this room has contributed to that, whether or not you were here at the first gathering, like some people who, could you please raise your hands if you were here at the first gathering? I see Kenz over there, who was our very first volunteer. Or whether this is your first gathering. You raise your hands if it was your first gathering, right? People showing up for the first time, looking for answers, support, for connection. And that engagement, it leads to measurable change. That thing I referred to, that pipe dream of a clinical trial, we have two. It was unimaginable 10 years ago. And while that work is incredibly meaningful and measurable for me, personally, the most important thing that happens here are the connections. I'm looking and seeing JP in the back here, who was at our very first gathering and is the first person who said, hey, we might have something that could work for your community. It's the connections with the volunteers who I've known for ages and I've grown to know and love their children. And it's with the families. But most of all, it's with your kids. For me, it's the kids. And while I'm, capable of standing up here and doing this every year, what I really like doing is coming and meeting your kids. And that's a little secret that some of you who know me well might know, that I always disappear for a little while with a kid and just get to know them and talk to them in however it is that we talk. And the children that I've met over the years have been the driving force for what we do here, whether it was Dustin, who I met at our first gathering, or Josh, the year after that, both of whom are sadly no longer with us. Or if it was Addie, Kenz's daughter, who sat in my arms through the third gathering while I was trying to get through the things I had to say, but I wouldn't put her down. Or last night when we arrived at the hotel, Kenz and Dianali and I went to check in, and we see this beautiful young woman at the desk, and Ken says, I think she's one of ours. And we looked over, and what we realized is even before we knew that Swan was one of ours, she recognized us as one of hers. And that's what this room is about. So I do want to take a couple more moments to talk about a child I don't normally talk about when I'm on the stage, and that's my daughter, Esme, who will be 14 in January. We thought she had SCN8A, but she doesn't. But in the time between when we were given the original diagnosis and it was taken away, we were embraced by this community. And we found a home here. And we stayed for years and years because it is our family. And I don't talk about her as much because she doesn't have SCN8A. And it isn't about her. But today, I'm just going to take a moment to say that without her, I absolutely would never have done this. I never would have been brave enough to stand up in front of rooms of people and hide the deep anxiety that I get in doing this. I never would have been driven to do this. I never would have known how to connect with your children the way that I have. But I just wanted to take a moment in this room to thank her. And take a look at what she did. So, with that, I will hand it back to Kacie.
I often say that Esme was the original cute, and that could not be any further it is absolutely the truth. She is the most beautiful little girl, but she's not really a little girl anymore. No. She is a full-blown teenager, and she'll tell you about it. I do want to take a moment, as well as Hillary was talking about the path that we have been on in our journey, to take a moment and take a look at the two banners to the left here. The banner hanging on the curtains is from 2016. And I know that there was a banner in 2015, but that was the last one we could find. If you don't know, Karen is our storage unit. She lives in Knoxville, Tennessee, and it's like our headquarters. Everything gets shipped to Karen. And as she's kind of looking through things, we found that. And instantly, every one of us were in tears. Because if you look at these banners, the colored pictures are those of our angels, and the black and white pictures are those that are still living. And when you count the colored pictures on 2016, there are seven angels as of 2016. In 2024, there are 63 colored pictures. Some of those colored pictures were only gray and white once, for 1 year, and then they find themselves colored. Liz and I were looking, and Liz was, you'll get to see her son later, her SCN8A sibling and son, and so she was looking for him on the 2016 banner, but she was looking for him in color, and then she realized, oh my gosh, he was in black and white then. So I do want to take a moment and just think about that. We have come so far. We have 2 clinical trials, we have a room full of people, but we're not done yet. Not until we keep seeing less numbers of those colored pictures instead of more of them. One more thing that we want to mention as well as we look around this room is that we have been focused a lot on epilepsy over the last 10 years. And that is still a very predominant portion of our community. But as we continue to grow and evolve, we're noticing that more families are coming on board that do not have epilepsy. And we want to make sure that we include them because, again, we're all about community and we want people to feel comfortable. We want people to feel like they belong and they're not alone. So in this year, in our logo, we took off epilepsy. And we now have the SCN8A purple heart, but we did take off the epilepsy portion because we wanted to make sure that we knew that everyone in this community mattered, whether you had epilepsy or not. All of us have our own challenges. We all have our own journeys. We are all on it together. So as you can see, TCSF has made monumental strides from championing research, driving clinical trials, to supporting families directly with social and emotional programming, and even directly financially with the Connor James Smith Patient Assistant Grant. And none of this would be possible without your leadership, Hillary. The dedication and the long-standing volunteers and the unwavering support of the community members who have been here since the very beginning. I do want to take a moment. Will those that have volunteered for TCSF, do you mind to stand so we can recognize all your hard work? Thank you so much. We have a little over 20 volunteers internationally, and we could not do this without your help. Thank you. 2024 has been a year of profound reflection and connection as our community continues to grow and evolve. Through our Awareness Day hashtag, If You Only Knew, we provided the world with a glimpse into the real lives of our families, fostering greater understanding and empathy. This year also highlighted the need for more education and support of palliative care. In response, TCSF partnered with the Courageous Parents Network for our Meaningful Change Education series, together under the theme Caregivers Crossroads, Navigating Tough Conversations and Tougher Choices. We created a safe space to address the very difficult challenges our families face every day. Additionally, TCSF collaborated with Costa and Gaith with SCN8A Australia to present Enabling Voices through Mark Making, an event born in 2023 after the passing of their SCN8A child, Layla. This event was held in Sydney, Australia, and it showcased over 80 pieces of artwork from 8 different countries. This international initiative brought our community's voices to life through the power of art. These programs and events have allowed us to confront the hardships that we face while celebrating the incredible resilience and strength of our community. They are a powerful reminder of what we can achieve when we come together.
So tonight, we will hear about groundbreaking research, gain critical clinical insights, and strengthen the connections that make this community so special. Every single person in this room, and I really truly mean every single person in this room, is here with a shared dedication to progress, fostering hope, and to breaking barriers. Together, we are absolutely driving forward meaningful change in this community, united in our commitment to transforming lives.
Okay, as we move through tonight, let us embrace that spirit of growth, evolution, and connection, looking ahead to a brighter tomorrow. All right, so now we are on to tonight's event. Okay. We have a very special, actually 2 very special guests today, and I think they're very nervous over there. I am honored to introduce 2 remarkable young men, Andrew Bush and Olivier Frappier, who both have siblings with SCN8A. Andrew is the devoted older brother to Cam, while Olivier is the proud older brother to Nico. Please join me in welcoming them as they share their unique perspectives and experiences as siblings. Try to get out of this by breaking his leg. Too bad.
Wow, that was loud. Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrew Bush, 14 years old. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm a freshman in high school, and I'm here to talk about how being Cam's brother has affected my life. So I'm going to start off with the negatives and go into the positives, although the positives far outweigh the negatives. So I don't like having friends over to my house because Cam can break stuff, be loud. We have to be quiet because he sleeps, and he does embarrassing things sometimes. It's also brought a lot of stress and worry into my life when he's sick or in the hospital. Cam also needs a lot of supervision, which means sometimes I have to stop what I'm doing or miss out on things to help watch him. But he's also given me unique opportunities. I got to meet players from my favorite hockey team, and we get to skip lines at theme parks. How cool is that? And that's a great thing of having him. Even though I miss some stuff, I get new opportunities. I'm not able to play sports or games with Cam. He's not able to. He doesn't have the coordination, nor does he understand how it's gonna work. We're moving into the good things now. So things that he does can seem intentional, but they're unintentional, and that's given me the view that sometimes people make mistakes or things come off meaning, hold on. Things come off as meaning something when they actually mean something else. Having Cam as a brother has taught me how to be independent. My parents have put a lot of attention into him, not to say they haven't to me as well, but I've had to be independent and work through everything with him. He's taught me to be more thoughtful towards other people, and that you never know what's happening at somebody's house or with their family. It's taught me to be more open to who people really are and what they have going on. He's taught me how to be a great brother and role model, because although he doesn't understand much, the things that he does understand, he learns from those around him. He showed me that no matter what people say, that you can achieve great things. The doctor said he would never walk or talk, and Cam has elopement issues, so he can obviously walk. He also is working on talking. He has a speech device that he can use, and he can make some sounds of letters. He's not there yet, but I believe he's gonna do it. He's taught me how to feel more empathy towards others, and that you never know the challenges that people have and how hard they try every day to just do basic things like talk. It proves to me that just because you can't talk, you can still understand. Like, we talk to him and he understands what's going on, even though he can't talk back to us. He taught me how to respect others, be kind, and care for others. I've always paid a lot of attention to him and made sure he's as happy as he can be. And he's taught me perseverance, because although he has this condition he has epilepsy, autism, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, and quite a bit of other things. So the fact that he's still mostly happy is great for me, and it shows that no matter what's happening, you can still feel happiness. Cam's taught me how to communicate with other people and to be patient, because you can't always say exactly what you want to say. You can't put it in words, and sometimes it takes a moment. Cam has taught me that love is more than just words, because he can't talk, so he's had to show it in other ways, such as hugging us or wanting to do things with us or wanting to be around us. That's about it. I'm very thankful for Cam. He honestly makes me the great person that I am.
So I am Nico's brother, Olivier, and I'm 14. I attend a French high school in Canada, and like I said, I'm the older brother of Nico, who has SCN8A. I was 4 when he had his first seizure, and I do not remember any of his seizures because it's been 8 years. So about Nico, he is 11 years old. Like I said, he's 8 years seizure-free. He's funny, happy, has loads of energy. And some things we like to do together are we like swimming in the pool, we like playing games like Uno, or sometimes on the Nintendo we play Mario Party. And we go on the trampoline a lot. Well, he asks me a lot, but mostly I say no. We go sledding in the winter. And yeah, some difficulties with Nico is that he says and does embarrassing things sometimes, like touching other people and being obnoxious and loud in places where he shouldn't be, like the school or in the library. And he also needs help in the bathroom, so if I'm babysitting him, I have to change him, I have to wipe his butt, and it smells. And he always needs to be watched because he runs sometimes. Like once he took my scooter and just took off in the road, and my dad had to get him in the car. And for his future, I don't know what's gonna happen in his future, but he's developing really well. So I hope he could be capable to live on his own. But if he needs my help, I will always be there for him. And but I will not live with him, though. I'll be with him all the time. And yeah, thank you.
Boys, I know you were nervous, but you did such a great job. Thank you so much for your honesty, right? Like our lives are so different, and they're weird and awkward sometimes, but they're also so beautiful. So thank you for not only your courage for sharing your stories today, but thank you for loving your brothers just the way they are. All right. I would now like to introduce Dr. Manoj Patel, Associate Professor in the Department of Anesthesiology at the University of Virginia. He will be moderating our professional presentations this evening. Now, those of you that are watching virtually, technology is wonderful when it works, and then when there's hiccups, it's a little frustrating. So the chat box at this current moment is not working. So if you have questions at the moment, we would like for you to email Liz, L-I-Z, at thecutesyndrome.com, and we will make sure that those questions are answered live after each presentation. And if we can get that chat going, then I will let you know. All right, Manoj, come on up.
Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to see this room totally packed. I'm so glad I'm not giving a talk today because it's going to be hard to follow those two guys. They really were incredible. Fantastic job. But we do have some great talks today, great clinical talks, great basic science talks, and we're very fortunate that we have some of, I would say, is the leaders in the field of SCN8A here today to give talks. And so we're going to start off right now with Rikke Moller, who is part of that powerhouse that is the Danish epilepsy group, and Madeleine, Oudin, who we all know as Margot's mum. And they're going to tell us a little bit about what somebody said this morning is the new kid on the block, the new drug, and they're going to give us some information about this new drug. So thank you.
Okay. All right, so we want to tell you about this study that hopefully will be published soon on Cenobomate as a new drug for SCN8A. And this really started out of the European SCN8A meeting, which happens every 2 years, either in Denmark or in Germany. And so this was in May, and we attended with my daughter Margot, who has SCN8A, and my husband. And, we were chatting about drugs, and Margot had recently started this new medication called Cenobomate. And a lot of the European neurologists were really shocked to hear that a young child, who was at the time was just 2, was on this drug. And this is a kind of newer epilepsy drug. The commercial name is Xcopri, and it's approved for adults. And it has 2 mechanisms of action. So it can block sodium channels, but it can also enhance GABA, which is an inhibitory signaling, just like the benzo drugs. And so this drug was approved for adults, and there was some published papers on use of it in kids, but the youngest kid was 10 years old. And there was no data out there on kids younger than that. So these neurologists were really surprised to hear that, such a young child was on this drug. And for Margot, it's been really life-changing for her. So this is her seizure data for the last 3 years. And you can see that once we started Cenobomate with this green line, her seizures went way down and have been stable to, not seizure-free, but she has, less than 10 seizures a day. And that's been stable for 1.5 years or so. We haven't been to the ER for seizures in 2 years, which is really amazing. And it's really brought a lot of stability. We also, even has improved her EEG background. On the top is before starting Cenobomate, and after you can see that the background brainwaves are calmer. And so for her, it's been, really life-changing, and for us to, not have to rush to the hospital, to be stable with her seizures. And so these neurologists were like, well, you should get this data out there because we didn't know that this drug could be prescribed to young kids. And so Rikke and I were chatting, and this is how we kind of decided to put together a study and look for more patients who had tried this to get this out there to the community so that people knew that this drug was safe and could work for our SCN8A kids and others who were much younger.
Yeah, so why are the advocacy groups, why the CUTIES Syndrome Foundation and the SCN8A Alliance and some colleagues around the world, we were able to collect data on 12 individuals with SCN8A who tried Cenobomate. I know it's small numbers, but it's a start, and we have some very promising results. So all of them, they had a presumed gain-of-function variant. Some of them were tested, not all, but we were running through prediction tools, and we're looking at the phenotype, and we are assuming that they were all gain of function. All of them had intractable seizures. The majority of them had more than 20 countable motor seizures a month before entering the treatment. They were on average on 3 different anti-seizure medications, and many of them, they had intellectual disability as well. So the 12 kids that we have studied have now been treated with Cenobomate for more than 6 months. On average, they have been treated for 16, nearly 17 months, ranging from 6 months to 42 months. And I think Margaret is one of the 42 months. Not quite. But yeah. Almost, yeah. So the mean maintenance dose has been 144 milligrams, and it has been administered either orally or tube by tube, or in a combination with taking it orally or via tube. And these are the results. So 10 out of 12, they have had a seizure reduction on Cenobomate, and 5 have had more than 75% seizure reduction, and 2 out of 12 became seizure-free on Cenobomate. And there was one patient in the study who did not have a reduction in seizures, but an improvement in alertness and also shorter seizures. So the family continued the treatment. And then besides all the good effects on the seizures, then we also saw good effect in non-seizure related outcomes, so in behavior and in cognition, and we also saw a decrease in the use of rescue medication. So so what are the side effects? So we saw that for 10 out of 12, we saw that the concomitant anti-seizure medications could be reduced. We also saw that 6 out of 12 had seizure side effects, such as somnolence. We had constipation, worsening of hypotonia, reduced alertness, and vomiting. And for some of them, the side effects were becoming either resolved or became less when they were reduced in other anti-seizure medications, such as sodium channel blockers or clobazam. So in conclusion, so it's just, again, as I said, it's a small study, but we show that these 75% had a very good effect of treating with sodium channel, with the that many of them have a good effect with this new sodium channel blocking compound, Cenobomate. And we saw also an increase in seizure-free days for many of the patients, which is really something that's worth looking into. We also saw non-seizure related benefits and a decrease in rescue medication. So in conclusion, it looks like the new kid on the block that it could be a promising add-on treatment for SCN8A related disorders. But of course, we need more cases, and we need maybe to look more into dosages, side effects, and so on. But this is at least a beginning. And then, as Madeleine mentioned, it has been tried now in kids down to 2 years of age, where it's only approved for adults, and out in the literature there are only published cases that are 10 years or older. So it is really astonishing and something that we should look more into. And I would just like to thank our team at the Danish Epilepsy Center. I think you will hear my colleague Elena for the next half an hour talking about different projects that we have going on. And then I want to thank all the families who participated in this study. Of course, we couldn't have done it without you, because it's your data, and we're just the scientists that are pulling it together. So thank you.
We have time for some questions. Get the mic.
No, there were patients that we knew.
Yeah.
You knew.
There's no one in the literature.
Not published.
No.
So my question is how likely is it that others would try it based on what you know now, and what's the resistance to trying something like this? I'm just kind of curious because.
So I know in the US a big issue is insurance. And so a lot of insurances wouldn't cover this because there's no data for young kids. And so I know even now I got contacted by a clinician who is a patient under 1 who wants to try it, and their insurance won't cover it because our data only goes to the youngest kid, which was about 1.5 when they started. So I know it's been a lot an insurance thing, and a lot of clinicians also not knowing that this can be safe for young kids. So now, I talk to families and I'm like, send them this so they see that it can work in young kids,
right.
And this can help with insurance.
So these kids already were taking this. You didn't actually suggest
No,
it.
no,
so they were already taking it.
We were just gathering.
So now the
data.
question is, how many are going to be willing to try it?
That's the $1 million question, Michael. Yeah. So we were just pulling together what's known by now.
Yeah.
And any other questions? I have a question. So this is 8A children. What about 2A gain of function kids?
That's what we're suggesting in the paper, that it could be beneficial also in 1A gain of function and in 2A gain of function. But we collected only a few data on 2A kids. So it's still work in progress. For 1A kid, we don't have any information yet.
Okay.
But why shouldn't it work?
Yeah.
Dennis has a question. Here.
I mean, it's hard, right? But it would be really, really, really helpful and convincing if now the prospective part of this starts, if there would be a weaning off phase, and the seizures would come back. I know no one ethics is big, and I know.
No, thank you.
I know, but
I'm not
just
gonna go there.
but you get me, right? So that would,
Yeah.
as this would help this field tremendously, right?
Yeah. I mean, the company is doing an actual clinical trial in kids now, so that is ongoing. And so I know there will be data coming out with that. We still don't know a lot about like what drug levels are good, like what doses to go to. All of that is like a huge unknown, and the company doesn't share any. So you can get drug levels measured, but no one knows like what you're shooting for and all of that. So there's still like a lot that's unknown, but asking families to come off is not going to happen.
No, and most of the kids were on sodium channel blockers already, right? The majority were either on phenytoin, oxcarbazepine, or carbamazepine. So it's really promising that you
Yeah.
can add another sodium channel blocker or with a
Exactly.
dual effect, and
Yeah.
then
Even when you failed lots
Yeah.
of medications, I think
Yeah.
that's what's like really exciting is that many of the children in this study had failed a lot of drugs. And so, you know, this is a good thing to try. Like, it's worth trying.
I have a question as well, and thank you for a very nice presentation. I'm just thinking about interactions, especially with phenytoin,
Yeah.
which can be a little bit tricky clinically.
Yeah. It's published that cenobamate does increase phenytoin and clobazam blood levels, so there's recommendation to start going down on both of those medications when you go up on cenobamate. So there is like a consensus paper on that, and you know we've had to do that definitely. So definitely some labs and stuff involved.
And hi, thank you for the presentation here. So for the science, I was wondering if you're proposing that cenobamate, it's binding both GABA receptors and sodium channels, or it's binding or regulating some either upstream or downstream effectors on both of these mechanisms.
Yeah, I think it has been shown that it's working on the persistent current, and that was one of the questions we got from the reviewers. So any of the variants affecting persistent current, and some of them were. And then the other thing is that it's boosting the tonic inhibition. I think that's what has been reported in the literature. So it has this dual effect, so interacting with the GABA receptors and then blocking the persistent current.
Yeah, I found that very interesting because these are two very different receptors. So my first idea was it's not direct binding, but modulation of something upstream or downstream. But has someone shown direct binding of the chemical to the receptor? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
No, I'm not sure they have.
Because if there's a share mechanism, then it's very worth to go and look on that. There might be even more things there, but pretty exciting work. Thank you.
Okay, we've got time for one more question.
Yeah, it's more that sharing. So we have recently like an adult with SCN8A loss of function variant, and actually it worked. So it's anecdotal, right? It's one individual, an adult, but was really responding to that drug. I don't know why.
No, but there's also been like a study in Dravet syndrome with adults with Dravet syndrome where they had a beneficial effect of cenobamate. And maybe it's because in adulthood, maybe you're not no longer treating the gene defect, but you're more treating the network dysfunction that's introduced over the years. So that's probably why it works in adults, but I would be careful in using it in loss of function kids with either Dravet syndrome or SCN8A. Or SCN8A for that sake.
I was just going to make a comment. So my daughter is part of this study, and this is very odd. But when we were coming down off of her, lower doses of Onfi, her movement disorder went just haywire. I'm assuming the Onfi was helping, and then as we were coming down, but I noticed every time we would give her Xcopri, cenobamate, then she automatically within 15 minutes she'd go, and her movement disorder would essentially melt away. And we're like, what is going on? So luckily we have an amazing epileptologist that is like, yeah, Stella's weird, so we're not gonna go by the book. And so we actually dose this 4 times a day. It has a crazy long half-life. We shouldn't have to do that. It's like a once a day, but we actually dose it 4 times a day based off when we call it her wiggles. So when her wiggles are worse, then that's when we give the cenobamate, and within minutes, it literally helps. So I don't know why, but I'm just throwing that out there to the people that maybe can figure this out, or parents that are like, maybe that might help. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, because the half-life is 60 hours. So yeah, it's
Great. Well, thank you for that. Round of applause. And I'll add that I consider Madeleine as Margot's mum, but she wears 2 hats. She is the Associate Professor, Department of Biomedical Engineering at Tufts, and I forgot to mention that. Sorry, Madeleine. So we continue with the powerhouse from the Danish group. Again, from the Danish epilepsy group, and we're going to hear a 2-part story, and it starts off with Dr. Roberto Previtali. I hope I pronounced that right. I probably didn't. And now it's going to be more about sleep disturbances and SCN8A. So, Dr. Previtali, thank you. Previtali. Sorry.
Okay, it's very difficult. It's very far away. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Roberto Previtali. I'm a medical doctor, and I'm a child neurologist and psychiatrist in Milan, and a PhD student. But I had the possibility to do a fellowship at the Philadelphia Epilepsy Hospital, working on different SCN8A project, and I collaborate for this project on the sleep disturbances in SCN8A related disorders. Starting from sleep and sleeping disorders, seizure and sleep quality are linked in a very complex way. And also, in particular, in people with developmental and epileptic encephalopathy, sleep disturbances are very frequent, and they are often reported also by families. And it is also a big issue related to their quality of life, but not only linked to epilepsy, but also to all the other comorbidities with intellectual disability, attention deficit, movement disorder. So always when we have a child with an SCN8 related DEE, the clinical picture is always very complex, and we have to take into account all the characteristics. And in particular, not only in general in DEE, but in SCN8A and 1.8, mice models show that sleep disturbances may be part of the clinical picture itself related to the SCN8 and SCN1A disorders. So what we wanted to do was to study these sleep disorders to characterize the prevalence and the nature of these sleep disorders. To do so, in particular, Dr. Francesca Furia put together a network of physicians from 13 centers worldwide, and all the patients that were considered had pathogenic SCN8 variants, and we collected all the clinical data. In particular, for these studies, we considered an interview, the sleep scales that were filled in by the parents, and also the 24-hour video EEG. Considering the sleep scales, we used 3 different scales: the sleep disturbance scales for children, the children's sleep habit questionnaires in the short version, and also the pediatric daytime sleep test scales. We included 47 patients with, sorry, this is the last one, 47 patients with SCN8 related disorders, and these are the cohort that we considered. We had 23 female and 24 male with a mean age of 7 years, but ranging from 2 to 39. And according to the comorbidities, the majority of them, 98% of them, had epilepsy, but you can see that also neurodevelopmental disorders were present. And on the right side of the slide, you can see the phenotype that this patient presented. The majority of them had a severe DEE, a third intermediate epilepsy phenotype, and only 2 patients had developmental delay without epilepsy. And in the other part of the slide, you can see also the intellectual disability. The majority of them had a profound intellectual disability related to the DEE, and also the majority of them had motor and verbal impairment. So, considering epilepsy, 46 of them had suffered from epilepsy, even though we have to consider that 15% of them were seizure-free when we collected the data. So they suffered from epilepsy, but they didn't experience seizure at that time. 26% had monthly or yearly seizure, and 41% a higher frequency of a seizure daily or weekly. And the majority of them, 63% of them, also had took more than 3 anti-seizure medication. So they, of course, were drug resistance. What is important is also the link between the seizures and the sleep, because 87% of them had a seizure related to sleep, while 13 of them, the seizure were not related to sleep. Starting from the interview that we have, overall 82% of family reported sleep disturbances, and also looking at the questionnaire, we can see that in the majority of the cases, the difficulty in initiating and also maintaining sleep was the most frequent issue. Followed by sleep breathing disorders, a problem in transition between sleep and wakefulness, but also then a daytime somnolence. What we saw is that we can see that patients who had a higher frequency in seizure, daily or weekly seizure, had also a higher level of sleep disturbances. While patients that were seizure-free had less sleep issues. This seems that there is a correlation between sleep and seizure, but it's not it's not the linear, it's not the simple, because you can see that also according to intellectual disabilities, patients with severe or profound intellectual disability experience more sleep disturbances than patients with a normal intellect. And also, for example, looking at the gastrointestinal problems, patients with that kind of issues has a higher frequency in sleep disturbances. We also go through the different ages and the different phenotypes of the patient, and we saw that actually the most represented issues was the difficulty in initiating and maintaining sleep, and it was across all the different type of ages. And also we look at the seizure frequency, and we saw that there was a high percentage of sleep disturbances in all the items in the patient that had a higher seizure frequency. But you can see that also the patients that were seizure-free experienced some kind of sleep disturbances. So again, there is no a clear correlation. We also go through the cognitive impairment and the motor impairment, and you can see that people with a higher level of impairment, both cognitive and motor, has a high level of sleep disturbances, but in some kind, you can see in the left part of the, I don't know if there is a pointer, yes, here, you can see that also people that didn't present intellectual disability has a high level of disturbances in the transition from sleep to wakefulness. And in this part also you can see that people with severe motor impairment have a high level of sleep disturbances, but in some kind there is no difference between people with severe and moderate impairment. So once again, there is no a clear correlation. We then go through the EEG and the polygraphic recording, and we see that the structure itself of the sleep was normal, because they presented all the types of normal EEG findings during sleep, but they had an increased number of arousal, of wakefulness, and also a decreased period of REM sleep and non-REM sleep level 3, that is the most profound type of sleep. What is very interesting here is that this is a polysomnography. You can see that there are the different type of sleep, from wakefulness, REM, and profound sleep, and also seizure. So in this patient that presented seizure, you can see that when he has the seizure, he also wakes up. So he stops his sleeps, but you can see that sometimes he wakes also when he doesn't present the seizure. While in this case, we have a seizure-free patient, and even though there are no seizure, that should be the red lines, there are many numbers of wakings during the night. And in this patient, is the same patient. You can see that in one night we registered the seizure and he wakes, but also in this night when he didn't experience any kind of seizure, the number of arousal are very high. Okay, so the sleep disturbances made those patients to take medication for sleep, of course, and the most frequent use are melatonin, but also clonazepam, neaprozim, and chloride hydrate. And when they use especially melatonin, actually there is reported an improvement in sleep initiation and maintenance in 89% of the patients. So actually, this kind of medication are effective. This is a problem, but we also saw that parents and caregiver quality of life was reduced because of the sleep disturbance of their children. And actually, we didn't add a specific trial and study of that, but we are willing to also study, so to do a follow-up studying also on parents and caregiver quality of life related to their children's sleep disturbances. So to conclude, we saw that the majority of patients, around 82% of patients with SCN8A related disorders, had also a sleep disorder. The main disturbance is in initiating and maintaining sleeps. Of course, in the majority of the cases in patients with DEE, the frequency of the sleep disturbances are higher, but not so correlated as we saw. And it's very important that a polysomnography should be undergone to see the sleep instability that we register. So what are the take-home message from this study on sleep disturbances is that sleep disturbances are very common in patients with SCN8 related disorders. And so we think that for every patient, these could be performed, an assessment of the sleep quality should be performed on routine basis, because it should be made by the clinical evaluation, of course, but also using specific scales and sleep recording, so using the polysomnography. And when they are present, the correct management and the use of certain medication should be done in order to improve the quality of life of the patients, and we will see also of the caregivers, because we saw that it could be related to seizure control, cognitive performances in a very difficult way. So we have to always to assess this problem and also, of course, take care of them. And this is all the group that work on this study. Thank you.
Very good talk, very interesting. I wonder how much your study could be extended to actual testing to manage sleep disturbance. I don't have a sense in talking to families that anyone has found anything that works regularly. And that is very frustrating. It's one of these non-seizure outcomes that we are struggling with as a group. Loss of function, gain of function, all over the board. So you mentioned melatonin being a good trial, to try it, but we haven't actually seen in our population that I'm aware of anything that is really working well. So I'm just wondering if you have any plans to extend the study to trialing some of these sleep aids.
I must say that talking about melatonin, I don't know how it is. For example, in Italy, we have very different kind of melatonin. Some working just on the first part of the night, just to make the child fall asleep. But also we have something on long relapse to avoid many awakenings during the night. Actually, I have more experience with many kind of epilepsy, not only on SCN8 using melatonin. Usually it's what at least we do in our center, and we have some positive response from the family. Of course, it's obvious that it's not always like that, because it's more complicated than that. And also we saw there are many different comorbidities linked to the sleep disturbance, epilepsy, neurodevelopmental disabilities. So actually is not easy.
It would be nice to see the sleep architecture of patients who are on melatonin, just to see if you have fewer wake events or if seizures are coming less.
Yeah, actually in this study we didn't correlate the use of melatonin to the sleep architecture, but of course this should be really a good option and also a good project to do. Maybe yeah. We will come to that. And also, actually, I was saying that the best part would be to have that before the use of melatonin or whatever other kind of medicine, and after that to compare. But this was a retrospective study, and so Elena now will talk about also what we are going to do.
Okay, we've got time for one more question, if there is one. If there isn't, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So next we have our final talk in our clinical session, and this is somebody that we've seen a few times because she spends so much time working on SCN8A, so we're excited to have Dr. Elena Gardella back, and she is a professor at the University of Southern Denmark and part of the Danish Epilepsy Center. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. So now I'm coming to talk with a topic which is our great topic, and I'm so grateful to all the speakers and for the question, because our brings exactly to that. Why we do need to assess natural history studies. We know that we have a phenotype which is complicated. Epilepsy is not the only issue. We have many other issues. We know pretty much of any single. We are spent the last 10 years try to quantify, also thanks to our beautiful fellows. So we dedicated to quantify any single aspect. But actually, since the picture seems to be quite scattered still. And we know from the basic science, we are excellent basic scientists, that we are progressed pretty much. But in the practice, how can we bring this thing together for making the life of our children better, for ameliorate their quality, their standard of care, to facilitate the use of new drugs? What is important really is to import all our knowledge into the clinics, to be able to make it available for the clinical management of this patient. So this is why we need to have a structure. Putting this thing together, maybe just looking back at what we know already, making a study about the published data. This is a nice example, a picture how you can put this data together. You have a nice overview, but still not suitable in the clinics for the concrete children will really well. So these studies are important, but are not what we are looking for. So why natural history study is important? It's important because exactly can answer the question that you ask, can answer whether a treatment is effective or not, whether you are a correct baseline, you are able to define exactly what is the trend of normal progression of symptom in this patient, and whether, for example, on concrete aspect that you need to quantify on sleep, a medicine is effective or not. For example, for new drugs, whether it's effective or not, what some aspects are ameliorated, some other not. So we need really to be able to quantify. And what about the natural history? This is a very fancy term, and many ways to approach this, many interpretations for natural history. We can have small study, single center, a few cases can permit you to go very in depth, but actually you don't have the critical mass to come to the conclusion. You can have retrospective studies. These are very important, and this is somehow what we did for many of our researchers, including the sleep study. Retrospectives are very important, give you an idea as to what has happened, but doesn't permit you to quantify exactly the details and permit you to establish, the outcome measure, what you were able to look at, but still many questions are open. So what is the next step? The next is the prospective natural history study. Starting from now, I'm asking the correct question. I detected the instrument for giving an appropriate quantification for any single aspect and go forward to collecting data. This is what we do. This is actually what is considered the gold standard also from the regulatory agency. Once you need to get approved any treatment for a disease, and we think now about our children, many drugs are on the horizon, we wait for that. We need to be sure that you have the correct assessment and you can immediately go to the trial and evaluate properly and objectively whether it's worth or not to go to take it. And this is why what they say is that the prospective natural history study, starting for now, quantifying for now, is very important based on the knowledge from the retrospective. So this is what retrospective is useful for selecting, making our idea clear. Prospective is the gold standard for making other knowledge suitable for the use. What we did actually in the last 12, 15 years, we have built up a registry which is accurate as much as possible, large enough. We have more than 1,800 cases included. We have selected a subgroup of that with the more detail for running the natural history study retrospectively. So now we have everything in place. What is the next step? The next step is run an international, multicentric, standardized and quantify prospective natural history studies. So we have all this data available for putting a clear-cut relationship between the basic science, the clinical information that we have already in place, and especially making everything ready for any kind of interventional study in the future, making this directly imported into the clinics. So this is started from the European, now we are multi-center international. We have, of course, the pleasure and the great opportunity to work together with you, with the Family Association. This is extremely important because at the very end, are families that need to benefit from that. So this is very important, having you aboard, having your point of view, having your, suggestion, and having your contribute. And this is why I really appreciate also having this study is meant to be driven through clinicians, because everything has to be standardized and has to be monitored. But of course, having Family Association provided with representative from our side, contributing officially to that gives the taste, our collaboration is strong, and how far can we go in this direction. I won't go that much into detail, just to let you know that this, I move to that this probably was meant to be in two-step, having a pilot study before that we did at our center. We recruited a very small number of patients at our center, 12 patients, starting with a pilot study, making sure that everything works, is feasible, and then we open up from March 1st next year to the big study. What is important, we need to reach a critical mass, and we have already the number of places, not too many patients just to be able to manage that, but many enough. So we are aiming for 100, 120 patients included, because we know that SCN8A is not a single condition. SCN8A, we have been focused so much in the last 10 years on that, is made of totally different conditions. We cannot mix up this condition, otherwise we'll never come to concrete results. So we aim to subdivide in subgroups. This makes that we need larger numbers for sure, because we know there is a severe phenotype, this is a benign, there are a few patients without epilepsy at all, and there are some kind of intermediate degrees on. All these subgroups are their own trajectory, and we need to follow the trajectory in a separate way. And we know also that this, we know already how it looks like, but we know also that there is almost, for many of them, a clear-cut relationship between this phenotype and the functional effect. So we know also that there is a reason why also we can have a different mechanism we can target that. So that means that we take advantage what the study we did in the past, and we move further following them with the scales. What is also important, as I mentioned, we are the great pleasure to work in collaboration with our cousin, family association with SCN2A, SCN8 and 2, they remind each other pretty much from the functional point of view. That means that also from the clinical point of view, there is a great advantage to share our experience. SCN2A started with a natural history study a few years ago. There are already some preliminary results. And we collaborate. It's a huge work. We run this Congress, European is more worldwide, common people worldwide somehow, and with SCN2 and 8, being together, sharing the experience, we know that there's very similar problems to be solved. So to make sure to make our data collection at least similar to the 2A, being able to merge the effort to compare this in the future. There will be a great advantage on both sides. And the study design is like that. You see there are several controls every 6 months, considering data acquisition and huge number of scales to quantify all the aspects, the epilepsy, the motor disorder, the movement disorder, the sleep. So we'll quantify the sleep respectively. And we quantify the sleep with respect to the drug assumed at that time. So this will answer also your question, Michael. And of course, any kind of behavior, the move disorder and the quality of life. And first, last but not least, is also the global clinical impatient of the families, how the families think that the patient is doing. And this is meant to be first a 3-year study with open up to 5 for sure, taking across this aspect. And what is important is also your voice. We are taking in consideration pretty much that the meaning of the patient. You recently came up also this nice study about what is matter really for families, what is important to look at. So it's important to take into consideration to have your voice and adjust the data collection to be sure that we really target what is better or more urgent or important to know in this day. Because we are, this is a huge work. We need to be sure that this is suitable for any kind of further study. So we need to be as comprehensive as possible. This is our team. This is our Congress, which was a great work, huge work to organize, but it's totally worth because came to several results in collaboration and study. And this is, of course, our network internationally. I will the pleasure to collaborate with all of you. We hope to come with the first results next year, and we hope everybody will be on board and be part of that. Thank you.
We have some time for questions if there are any questions.
Hi. Beautiful, beautiful work. I'm very inspired by you paving the road for this kind of behavioral analysis. And I know the effort that it takes to coordinate like parents and how to extract that data. So this is wonderful. And I was wondering if you are thinking about collaborating or including yourself in your studies. Some other metrics that I know other people here in the audience is using, like smart devices and things that can measure sleep, heart rate, oxygen, and all of those like hard numbers that we can quantify.
Yeah, this is a great question. Yes, of course. Of course, this is extremely interesting, but you know, less is more sometimes. So we need, at the very beginning, to keep separated research from natural history. So we need to make this as accurate as possible, but feasible and realistic for every site. So at this point, our priority is to quantify. It takes, I mean, this protocol was ready 2 years ago. It took 2 years just to make it, to accomplish all the requirement for the medical agency, for all the association for movement disorder, to be sure they accomplish everything. Now has to make it run. And of course, it's very important to use technology. I can see that we need preliminary data for that. We do not need to, block further this study. The study has to run. Now it seems to be the most, accurate possible. And for the next future, definitely import that, because it's very important to quantify as much as possible.
Yeah, Elena, I'm a big fan as well, as you know. So one thing I don't understand, don't want to get into too many of the details of the study, but the granularity of the study. So will the data be coming in at a certain, according to a doctor's visits, or will you have special visits with families as you go? Do you have daily data? What kind of data at the granular level?
So, it would be take a long time to go into detail, but of course we need to do it. But in pills, it's like that. There are in-person, face-to-face visit every 6 months, twice a year, and is considered for children below the age of 6 to have a call, updated a call in between, so every 3 months. And the granularity of the clinical collection is quite demanding, I must say. This is the limit of the study, but we need to be ambitious. So that means that having a baseline takes, just for anamnesis, it takes 30 to 40 minutes with a lot of question and quantification. So there is a clinical visit, which takes at least 1 hour, yes, to be fulfilled. And then we have a number of scales to be. So this is demanding. This is a 1 day work for each control. So it's not, it's a piece of cake. It's quite demanding. But like that, we are reasonably sure to cover all the aspects and to come with reasonable results to be also approved for the regulatory agency for any kind of aspects. So I am amazed what you said about the effect on the Cenobomate movement disorder. We'll come back to that. This is something that we really need to quantify, because it's very important to quantify the effect on seizure, because we are not be good enough to do that. But the effect of non-seizure outcome measure are totally unknown and not possible to be measured retrospectively in a proper way. So this is something we'll be very focused on.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It is my honor to introduce Ethan Ramirez, who will be presenting this year's Memorial Moments video. Ethan is a proud big brother of SCN8A Angel Will, and the son of Liz Ramirez, TCSF's bereavement support and grants advisor.
My name is Ethan Ramirez, and my brother Will died of SUDEP in 2017 at the age of 7. We're at a point in our program where we take time to honor, remember, and miss our loved ones we've lost to SCN8A. Those we've lost in our community are always guiding the work of the CUTIES Syndrome Foundation. They are engaging in the ongoing efforts to honor those whose lives were taken by SCN8A with a memorial wall on the website to keep their memories alive. Will is an amazing brother, and I miss him every day. I think I can speak for everyone here and say that we all miss our siblings, children, and friends who have died from SCN8A. I'm grateful that this community is a group of people who have come alongside my family and me to always remember and miss Will. Now, please join me in honoring and remembering those we've lost to SCN8A with this video.
In the journey with SCN8A, we face profound challenges that test the strength and resilience of our community. We both grieve and determination. We honor the loss of these 71 children. 71. This year was 11 more than last year. These memories fuel the urgency for our community's mission. Amid the moments of heartache, the true strength of our community shines. Families supporting one another. Clinicians offering steadfast care. Researchers pursuing answers. And industry partners forging new paths. Again, we stand united. While the challenges are many, so are the victories. No matter how small, each step forward, each breakthrough, and the unwavering spirit of our community reminds us that we continue this fight. During the dinner break, please take a moment to view the rotating slideshow as we celebrate some of these meaningful milestones. But also take a moment and please hold these parents in your heart. And the community that continues to see our children dying. It is very difficult, even for those that have children that are living, to see our family and our friends losing their children and wondering when their child's going to be the next one up on this PowerPoint. On a completely separate note, we know that it is hot in here. And we're working on that. And with that, we're gonna get up and we're gonna move around a bit. We're going to have dinner and we'll see you back here in about 30 minutes. Hello, everyone. All right, it is so lovely to hear all these conversations and see people mingling and talking. And please feel free to continue eating. There's more food and drinks out there, so feel free to come in and out as you please. But we are going to go ahead and continue on with our programming since sometimes we run a little behind here. But I would like to introduce really quickly our TCSF volunteer and Addie's mom. We have Mackenzie Wardrope. And yes, woo! And Mackenzie is going to reveal our 2025 Awareness Day hashtag, which is a really big deal. Well, she's going to tell you more about it. How's that? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, as Kacie just said so, my name is Mackenzie Wardrope, and I am mom to the most amazing and beautiful 10-year-old Adelaide. I cannot believe that we are already at our 10th annual gathering. I never could have imagined all those years ago, sitting on my home, putting labels on chapsticks and notepads, that this event would have grown to this capacity so quickly. It has been an incredible honor for me to not only be a member of this community, but to be the very first volunteer in this chapter of the Foundation, which has so graciously allowed for me to show up whenever I could and supported me when life became too much and I had to back away. To our incomparable founder, Hillary, this community would never have made it this far without your relentless ambition, your tireless hard work, and your inability to take no for an answer. If not for you, we never would have been able to walk through doors that are seemingly locked to most everyone else. To Kacie, the board, the executive crew, and the rest of the volunteers, you have done a commendable job keeping the machine well-oiled. Thank you for your heart and commitment. And to every single one of you who showed up here tonight, I know I can speak on behalf of many. It means the world that you are here to connect with us, hear our stories, and see that your work does not go unappreciated or unnoticed. We are not just numbers, but the faces that you help each and every day. Thank you. All this being said, I am so excited and honored to be here tonight to share with you 2025's International SCN8A Awareness Day hashtag. In 2017, it was an easy decision to choose February 9th, the birth date of Shay Emma Hammer, the first ever diagnosed case of SCN8A, to celebrate our small yet mighty purple family. We kept moving forward, chose hope. We were stronger together against all odds, sharing our cute stories. We celebrated today and shared what we wish you only knew. Our new theme is two simple, short, yet powerful words. I am. We chose this theme as we wanted to give you the opportunity to take the lead in telling your stories the way that you see fit. This hashtag gives the chance to celebrate the joys, express the sorrows, and connect the dots in between. While we are all members of this tribe, not one of our journeys has been the same. We don't all fit in the same box, so this coming year, we are encouraging you to fill in the blank the way that makes most sense to you. There are simply no wrong answers. We are very much looking forward to spreading our reach farther than ever and learning more about each and every one of you. Everyone here, every child, every parent, every family member has a story worth sharing. What's yours? Thank you.
Thank you, Kenz. Also, in case you're unaware, our Awareness Day, we have a pretty heavy social media presence, and TCSF just entered the world of TikTok. So make sure that you follow us on all of our socials, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I think that's it. Is that it, Daniel? And YouTube. And LinkedIn. You can tell I don't do this part. My amazing team does. All right, so as we move forward with tonight's presentations, I would now like to introduce Dr. Brian Pfister, the Vice President of Medical Affairs at Praxis Precision Medicines, presenting Relutrigine, Revolutionizing the Treatment for SCN8A.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's always a humbling experience to be here. Last couple of years, we've presented about what we're going to do and kind of showing this slow progression forward. This year, I do have a nice surprise for you. So we'll talk a bit about results, right? So that's kind of what the driving factor is that we're doing here, is really trying to bring medications to families like yours. It's always a little tough for me to honestly, talk with the families and to be here because when I look at it, like you guys are very similar to my families. It's very close to my heart. My son has epilepsy, as I've mentioned, I think before in the past. So seeing your journeys and feeling kind of the excitement and fear that you guys have is definitely very near and dear to my heart in a lot of ways. So we'll talk tonight about revolutionizing the treatment of epilepsy. And so what that means to me is when you revolutionize something, it means you're doing something different, right? So we need to do something different than what we've done up until this point. And so many people say, what gets you out of bed in the morning? And I say, despite the fact of my chiseled physique, it's not the gym. So I'll just, for full disclosure, it ain't that. But the truth is it's you. Right. So as I mentioned, because my son, what he's gone through, my goal is to try to make your lives better. Right. And so anything I can do, whether I can educate you, whether I can help you understand what goes on some level, or more importantly, can we bring real treatments to market quickly, is really what we're trying to do. So that's what our mission statement is really that we're trying to create life-changing medications and do this as fast as possible, and to do it again and again and again. So my team in the back of the room, they can definitely attest to this. Praxis is dedicated to doing this. So you are our mission, and what that mission then turns into is this activity. What we want to do is develop these medications as fast as possible, as safely as possible, and as effectively as possible. So I'll show you. I won't bury the lead because as I mentioned before, I wanted to talk to you about the results. So what did we see in our clinical trials? So what we've seen so far is in the first cohort, we've seen a drug that has been very highly efficacious, has been well tolerated, and has shown us seizure freedom rates that we had not expected. So what this means to us is that we've created a molecule that can create benefit in your lives. And we can do it in a way that minimizes risks because of the way the molecule functions. I'll show you that in the next slide. But we can do it in a way, too, that you don't have to wait to titrate the drug. So what we've seen before, I've worked on other drugs and seeing Rikke presenting the data on Cenobomate. In a former life, I worked on Cenobomate, and I like the drug a lot. So just for full disclosure, I do like the drug. It's great. I like ours better in a lot of ways. And I like it because the last thing that you want to do is you want to wait, right? So what we have, and I think this is the really cool feature of the product, is that we're able to start immediately at therapeutic levels, and we don't have to wait to titrate, during the course of the trial, which I think is important because, again, I'm a bit of an impatient person, and I want to see results as fast as possible. So what we see, too, is typically drugs are developed for adults first, and that's just kind of the way things go, and then they get reverse engineered, calculated back to be used in children, and that's part of what we wanted to do differently at Praxis. We want to create the drugs from the bottom up with the children in mind. So we look at what are you living through, what are your lives like, and so we did factor this into, we want a drug that's once daily dosing. So at my house, we're twice daily dosing. So I'd love to be once daily because you kind of get a little nervous, if you miss a dose by accident. But we have once daily dosing. It's keto friendly, J-tube friendly, G-tube friendly, right? So all the things that we know specifically are aspects of your life, we wanted to make sure we could include in a product that met you where you are. The other thing that we've noticed is when we look at this product and where we see the data and what the evidence shows us is this can be first line. like without this titration piece, with the focus on the sodium channels. So as you know, with SCN8A, focusing on sodium channels is the path to take, you know, and we know that that's a good pathway. We just have had issues in the past getting drugs that we could dose either high enough or stably enough to really create a benefit for families. So what we've seen here is we have, you know, a highly potent product, meaning that we don't have to dose a lot of it, and we have a very selective product, meaning that it's really working on the functional components of the sodium channel that are malfunctioning. So I'll show you this. I know this graph looks kind of scary. You've probably seen it. We did enhance it to add a little bit more flavor to what you've seen. And to many people who wondered if I just was like a head on a Zoom, I'm not. There's the rest of me. But here what we've got is on the left side of the screen, we have normal sodium channels. And this is probably the most important component of this product, is the way that this drug works is it doesn't impact those normal channels. So the ones that open, close, and inactivate are not going to be inhibited by this type of product. So that what we focus on is the channelopathy, or the channel that isn't closing or isn't inactivating. And we want to inhibit that function. And as Rikke had mentioned about the persistent current that you see like with Cenobomate, ours is highly specific to persistent current. Because one of the things that we've seen with SCN8A and the 8A patients both is that they are susceptible to issues with persistent current. And what happens is if we don't modulate that effectively, then we don't get seizure control. So our drug actually is able to control the persistent current much better to create a greater likelihood of having seizure freedom or significant seizure reductions. What we see too is normally with other sodium channel drugs is if they block everything indiscriminately, you get that sedation effect, right? So we've seen this in a lot of kids who like, hey, great, I'm not having as many seizures, but I'm also not as interactive with the environment around us. So it comes as a trade-off. So what we're trying to do and what we in our heart of hearts believe is that we can give you a product that's going to help control the seizures in a way that hasn't been done before without the sacrifice of the functionality. And I'll show you a slide on that here in a little bit. So what's interesting, and I mentioned revolutionizing something, we've got to do it differently. And so one of the things that we've seen, one of many actually, is that the drug does function differently. And so what this graph shows is in phase 1, you look at healthy volunteers, so patients or volunteers in this case, who don't have epilepsy. They typically are very highly susceptible to sodium channel inhibition, so they would feel the side effects very quickly. And what we saw in this patient population or in this healthy volunteer group is 130 healthy volunteers had been tested on this product before it made it into the clinics in patients. And what we saw is the patients, or in this case, the healthy volunteers, were able to continue taking the drug without reaching a ceiling. So there was no maximum tolerated dose. That doesn't happen. That is typically something that we have not seen before, where we could go about 15-fold higher, so 15 times higher than what we would think we would need to be before we're seeing any type of side effect profile. And these, again, healthy volunteers didn't get to a point where they had to tap out. They were able to continue taking the drug, which to me is a strong piece of evidence to say this drug is different than what we've seen, and we should expect it to act differently. So as I showed you before, the drug is designed to be different. Now we're seeing evidence that it is acting different. And so kind of continuing this idea of being different, we know there's many hurdles to being in clinical trials. And there's many hurdles in being in clinical trials for epilepsy. And one of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to design the trials differently. So that was the DCT. So how do we bring the study to you where you are? How do we help you not have to be on planes and have to travel or have to drive long distances? So we designed a trial that was able to be executed completely in the comfort of your own home. And this means that we'd have neurologists who would come to your house, can do the physical examinations, neurological examinations, a nurse who could draw blood, and then studied medication that could be delivered to you. So this really created an opportunity for us to revolutionize the way that we do clinical trials and create this opportunity like we hadn't seen before. So the idea of doing things differently is tearing down the barriers, because there's a lot of times we can find barriers to not doing something, and what we're trying to do is tear those down to give you an opportunity to be in trials, to have new treatment options. And so we did this, and you can see here everything's done at home. Then throughout the course of the trial, follow-up visits, additional visits, drug dispensation visits are all done at home. And this was for 16 weeks, and then we were able to get into the open label extension component. So when you look at, as I mentioned before, the drug works very robustly, but I want to show you what the patient population looked like so you can get a feel for the severity or how these patients were presenting. So what we see here, average age is about 6 years old of the patients who were included in the trial. Equally split. We had 2A and 8A in the trial, so about equally split as well. We looked at the age of onset, in the population. We were looking for early onset seizures in the 2A population to indicate gain of function, because we're going to treat gain of function patients. When we look at the number of ASMs that the patients had been on, so the other medications, on average, most of them had been on 3 to 4 ASMs. So this was going to be the 4th or 5th anti-seizure medication used. And so typically, when you go down the algorithm and you get into a situation where you're adding more drugs on, you don't always get better results. And that just kind of has been what we've had to live with. But if we think about it differently, designing drugs differently, maybe we can look for a different result. So when we look at the side effects, because I want to make sure that we have fair, balanced representation of the data here, when we look at the side effects or treatment emergent adverse events, what we didn't see is a major side effect profile issue. There was nothing that was standing out as being major concerns. And what's important to note is in the course of the trial, the amount of placebo patients were on was very, very limited. So in a 16-week trial, the most that a patient would be on would be 4 weeks of placebo. Because we know if we don't treat children with 8A, with new medications, we know exactly what the results tend to be. So we wanted to limit that while controlling for placebo effect and creating strength in the data for us to make decisions about moving forward. So what we saw is, again, safety profile looked very promising, looked very good. No dose reductions of study drug were required, and there were no serious adverse events related to study drug. So all these are green lights. All these things are very positive when we're looking at drug development. So I know you're asking the question, like, how good is it? And so that's a relative question. But what we saw in the 16-week double-blind period is we saw a 46% reduction from baseline in seizures. So keeping in mind that most of the time sodium channel drugs are titrated, and they may take 6 to 12 weeks to titrate. In the time period it would take to titrate and get onto a stable dose for about a month, we were able to reduce seizures by 46% on average. But what was really, really remarkable to me, and I think to the rest of the people and to the company, is every third patient became seizure-free. So this isn't just like, hey, maybe we had a couple patients. Every third patient who took the product became seizure-free. To me, that's such an important component of this, because treating seizures and getting to seizure freedom, I think it should be a realistic goal that we have. So we have to think differently about what are we looking for? What outcome are we looking for in a clinical trial? And ultimately, we hope for seizure freedom, but as many people in my company say, hope is not a strategy. So that means that we have to do something different. And that's exactly what we've done here, is we have done something different. We've created a product that has a very distinct different profile that is targeted into the sodium channel, but is resulting in drastically better outcomes than what we typically had seen in other clinical trials. One of the things I want to show you too is while seizures are important, I know they're not always the most important thing to families. So I want to show you functional outcomes. So as mentioned earlier in the talks tonight, we looked at aspects of functional outcomes. So things like behavior. So as we saw seizures, getting better, as we saw patients responding, we saw the behavior get better. And we also then saw communication get better. And so what I want to stress on that is not just verbal communication, not just speech and those type of things, but what we saw is that patients were able to express interests, needs. They were able to, communicate more with their environment around them. And so going back to how the drug works, as I mentioned before, most of the time you can, get some reduction in seizures with sodium channel drugs, but that comes with the cost. So what we're seeing here is reduction in seizure freedom without the cost and trade-off of sedation. And I think that's an important component to think about as what you're looking for, in treating your child. The other thing that was interesting too is during the duration of the trial, you could see that the intensity and frequency of the seizures changed, so they got better. So this is important because you see the benefit in 16 weeks, and I'll show you a statistic here in a minute. But the longer the patients were on the drug, the better and less severe the seizures got. And I think this is important because, at least in my house, that was where we saw getting closer to control is as they were getting less and less and less intense. Then we're like, okay, we're getting somewhere. The thing that I think was very surprising, and the thing I think is incredibly important, is when we look at the overall alertness and awareness of the children, what was noted is nearly 70% of the patients, as rated by the clinicians, noted that they were much more aware, much more alert. So that, again, kind of going back to the way that these drugs work, when you create a different drug that is controlling the sodium channels that you want to control, leaving the normal ones alone, this is a result you would expect to see. We'd expect the seizures to get less, and we'd expect the alertness and awareness to increase. So this is proof positive to us that we've done something that hasn't been done before and can create an opportunity for families to have another treatment option that is significantly better, in my opinion. So when you look at it as just kind of highlighting that, we have the 46% reduction, but in the open label, as they were on it longer, it went to 75%. In the most recent data is actually 77% seizure reduction. So the question, and I think it was asked to me recently, is you said every third patient got seizure freedom. What happened to the other two? So the other two, as they continue to stay on the medication, got to that 77% reduction on average. That I think is so important to me because we look at it and we know the correlation of reducing seizures to the reduction in risk of SUDEP. And I think when we look at it, it's easy to focus on an endpoint like seizures, but looking at qualitatively, what does that mean? What am I getting for that? So I think that we've come up with a really nice balance of benefit, of likelihood of seizure freedom without major risks being introduced to the families. In the first trial, we had it where you had to be on one sodium channel blocker. So because of the data, because of what we saw, and where we want to go with this product, we've determined that in this next trial, you'll be able to be on at least, 2 sodium channel blockers, the maximum, plus then other ASMs. So what this typically means, or how I see this playing out, is for families who are at that point of making a decision of adding something else, you don't necessarily have to give up what you've already gained to look for something better. So you could add this on top of what your current regimen is. As long as your current regimen is 2 sodium channel blockers or less, you could add this, but you could have other ASMs. So you could have clobazam, you could have other things that are on board. Because of the way that the drug is interacting, you don't have that same risk. So for me, I think it creates a nice upside potential to have that opportunity to go after seizure freedom and to go after drastic reductions in seizure frequency and severity. So looking at it kind of, just to kind of close out and summarize what we see here is, the age inclusion is 2 to 18 years of age. The patients have to have 8 motor seizures per month. And the patients then have to be, as mentioned, no more than 2 sodium channel blockers, and they have to have a diagnosis of SCN8A DEE. So again, for those who are thinking about should they be in a trial, are they interested in a trial, we've created a lot of options for you, and I think year over year we've talked about, hey, we're going to do this, and now we're like, hey, it's going, we're enrolling, and now we've got data to show this. But what we've done is in order to accelerate the time, and to increase rather decrease the time to market for other families, is we're enrolling the second part of the trial, which is the registrational piece. So that means we are like right at the doorstep. And I want to say thank you to all the families, because without the families participating and without the families taking that leap of faith in what we're doing, we wouldn't be at this point. We would still be saying, now enrolling, hoping, but now we're at this point where we can get into the registrational phase with the agencies and make this a reality for many families. So in closing, we always like to dare for more, and I think in this situation, we've done a lot of things differently, so you can do things differently. So I appreciate the time, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you as a group, and again, I appreciate everything that you do. Thank you. Question?
Promising. Could you tell us a little bit about if you could get people enrolled in the EMBOLD study and fully fill it up?
Yep.
When can we actually see this? What are the next steps, and how long do we wait for something where it's generally accessible?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we would have, in this case, we would have 16-week double-blind period that we would do. So duplicating what we had done in the first cohort in an expanded cohort with more patients, then we would do the analysis. And to Praxis credit, I've never seen analyses done so quickly in my life. I've been at other big pharma places, like literally, and they can attest to this, they lock them in a room until they come out with some data, right? Until this is analyzed. I kid you not, I think it was over Labor Day. So kudos to the team in the back for making that sacrifice. But what that means is once we get enrolled and once we can get the data through, so it's whenever 16 weeks from the last time that patient comes in the trial, or from the first patient last visit, then it's like a number of weeks before, and then the submission will be put together, go to the FDA for review. And I believe that they would be able to do an expedited review of that, but don't quote me on that for sure. But based upon the need in the population and community, then I think you could be, if we get this enrolled, we could get it submitted quickly. And we're talking, instead of 5 years, we're talking, a year and a half kind of thing. So I might be able to get clarity in the back if I'm off on my estimation. But we'll move as quickly as possible because we know it's meaningful to you and we know it's meaningful to other families. And then what we do as well is look at working with payers so they understand the benefit and understand where this fits into algorithm so that you're not facing this uphill battle of how do I get this covered and those type of things as well. So.
Okay. Thank you for the talk. It's really exciting, obviously, to see some data. I think just to help the room understand, because I think these timelines, for those of us who work in drug development, we, understand some of the implications of these timelines. I think if we could just get, I know we'll be talking tomorrow with the families more about drug development 101, but just some clarity on the distinction between what you've outlined here, which is an investigational product, not an approved product.
That's correct.
And so I think it's just important for families to understand that it's an investigational treatment. Could you talk about how many patients you intend to enroll in the next phase, and to Michael's point, a little more clarity on what that really means, right? When you're enrolling, it's not like a gate opens and the community piles in and then it's done, and a year and a half later they're picking it up at their pharmacy.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Hillary. And we're looking at, so the way we've designed the trials is to accelerate the likelihood of approval. We didn't have a hard stop of the trial, close out centers, restart centers to go through all that, which does shave off months to a year, in a lot of cases, because it takes a while to get things set up. So by doing it that way, we can shorten that timeline. But to your point, when we're looking at 80 additional patients, like it took us a fair minute to get the 16 that were in this particular trial. So to get 80, it's going to take a community effort. And it does take time. And so one of the things that we want to do, and the thing I want to help people feel comfortable with is, what does it mean to be in a trial? what can I expect to see in a trial, but you're right, it's going to take, you know, a number of months to enroll those particular patients. But you know, we feel very strongly about the potential for this to be, you know, a breakthrough, you know, for them, and for this drug to be drastically different than what they've had. So, you know, anything we can do to, you know, address questions the community has and to be there to partner with them, we're happy to do that.
Thank you. And just a follow-up question regarding the measurement for, you know, how you determined alertness, for instance, and the definition of, you know, so alertness on one hand, and then the definition of seizures being better and less intense, because this is, again, this is a hard thing to measure,
Sure.
and people have a lot of debates about how you do that, and so I'm just curious about if you could give us some insights into
Yeah,
that.
definitely. So we use two different scales. So one is the clinical global impression of severity. So at baseline, how severe did the patient seem to be, right? So this is a qualitative assessment based both by the caregivers, so the families were able to say, my kid is, you know, this severe or that severe, as well as then the clinician being able to say, based upon my clinical evaluation of the patient, I rate the severity to be X. And so what they would look at is then at baseline, and you look at end of treatment and see, was there change? So it's not like I'm anticipating change, but it's using the patient as their own control, and to say, where are they at baseline, where are they at end of study, and that would be the CGI-I, which is the Clinical Global Impression of Improvement, and those are both clinician rated as well as caregiver rated. And so what was interesting is I had shown you the light and dark kind of bars. In that, you did see pretty good agreement between both the clinicians and the caregivers, which I think is always important because, I mean, I always think my kid's wonderful, but, you know, sometimes, you know, we get a different opinion when somebody else looks at them clinically and looks at them in a different way. But we've seen this used in other drug development processes, and it's something that is accepted. And I think it's good because it allows for, you know, everyone doesn't have to move on the same scale in the same way. So if you pick certain scales as endpoints, that means in order to establish an effect, everybody kind of needs to move in the same direction in this same domain. Whereas you could have some patients who are improving in one domain, some improving in another, and you could still understand there's improvement. And I think it does create an interesting outcome. And to be able to see that in 16 weeks is also, I think, a very profound impact too, because again, it's a lot of times other scales may take much longer to see the benefits, but to be able to assess, you know, from start of treatment to end of treatment, was there significant improvement, and to see it, I think, is important. But it's a great question.
And the seizures also.
Oh yeah, same thing with the seizures. So they would look at it, and I always use the analogy, like my child, when we first were going through the seizure adventures, we had the post-ictal emesis, right? So he threw up every time he had seizures. And so then we'd have some seizures and throw up, and then we would be like super tired. So the refractory period before he was like able to get up and move around was much longer. But as the medication got better and he seemed to improve, so that time to recover was much shorter. So you could have a situation where you had 4 seizures one week and 4 seizures another week, but the 4 seizures on the second week may be shorter duration, may be faster recovery period, and may be less, like we didn't see the vomiting. So that's something like what you would see where the intensity and the frequency would decrease during the course of the trial.
Okay, and so was it reported in an exit interview, or is that?
So they would look at it during the clinical assessments. So the clinician would look at it and say, oh yeah, the seizures seem to be getting better. Even if you had, like, the number was the same, you could see that there was a change in the severity based upon their assessment and the families. And a lot of that, I think, is nobody knows your child better than you. So when you look at it and say, I think he's getting better, you know, or I think we're seeing less frequency, or we're seeing less, it's based upon those patient-reported outcomes. So.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
What were the criteria you used limited to 2 years instead of opening up to broader?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and you know, typically we have to thank the FDA for certain things. So, you know, FDA does limit and put restrictions on what age ranges we can go into with certain data that we have. So that was where we had aligned with the FDA, is that we do 2 to 18. My heart of hearts, just as me as a father, I would love to go younger because I think there could be potential benefit, but the limitation that was placed was 2 to 18 for right now. So we'll continue to push hard to see if we can get that changed and go younger. But
the decision was due to the FDA.
No, it definitely was, yeah, not based upon data or any issues or any safety issues. It's just that's typically where, you know, the FDA is going to put you. Yes.
Hi. In your phase 1, you said there was a broad range of tolerability to very high doses.
Yep.
But in the second study, you only used 1 dose, and I wondered, given that there's still a lot of seizures, the seizure frequency was very high, is there a place for some sort of dose-finding component of the development?
So yeah. So what we saw is, you know, in the clinical trial, so we looked at you know, I think the starting dose was 0.5 mg per kg, so 0.5 milligram per kilogram, and then if the seizures, you know, hadn't gone down a bit, then they could go up to 1 milligram per kilogram. And what we noticed is that seemed to be a very both tolerable and efficacious dose in that particular trial. So that was where that dosing had come in. So you know, I think there would be always, from a company standpoint, to look at it and say, is there more? You know, as we do dare for more, would there be more? Is there something we could do there? And so that's something that we're, you know, taking under consideration to see, you know, what that would look like. But going with the replicatability of one trial to the next and be able to have a submission document that could go to the FDA, then a lot of times you'll do what you had done in the first one to get a similar result component as well.
Yes, a little question related to, of course, the data are amazing, the number are little, but of course promising. Yep. I will go back to the potential to be a disease modifier. This is the most interesting aspect. Yep. You mentioned no seizure outcome, which is really interesting. My question, I will go back to what Hilary asked, whether, first of all, I'm not sure whether you mentioned improvement, but beside improvement, was there any, was improvement or stable, or there was improvement, stable, or some worsening?
I don't recall for sure. I can ask Silvana in the back of the room. Yeah. She was our clinician on the trial. I don't recall any worsening that we had noticed with the patients, you know, looking at the CGI based upon, or CGI based upon the clinicians. We didn't see a worsening of condition, and we saw, you know, again, across the board, you know, robust seizure reduction with that seizure freedom. So yeah. It's a good question.
Yeah. And the other part, it was about the placebo. What did they behave in this regard compared to the placebo that you have?
Yeah, so when we did the 46% reduction was placebo adjusted. So if we took out any placebo effect.
No, I mean for the non-seizure outcome measures.
Oh yeah, so I don't think we had done the analysis in that you know that specific detail, because we looked at, again, because of the limited placebo periods in the trial, so you only had 4 weeks, it would be hard to kind of extrapolate that component. But what we were looking for is to see if there were any changes, fluctuations based upon when they had the placebo.
Because if this is confirmed, will be really interesting. Yep. You need to, of course, to confirm. And if so, do you plan to try to increase the granularity of the test for the upcoming study? Because of course you need to be sure what is changing, not just a clinical impression, but quantified. That will be really relevant for, I mean, this kind of perspective.
Yeah, so we're looking at like right now duplicating what we had done with the first part, and then we could look at additional granularity component. But I think that would be coming later if we did do that. Okay. So not in the second cohort, just because you would get a kind of a mixed model of a study where you're doing one thing in one part of the study, like if you're trying to combine the data into the submission package and then you have variability, I think it could create a confound in the data. But it's definitely a great question. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Yep, I think Dennis, you got a question?
Yeah, congratulations, right, Brian? Just want to remind myself, so the label at the end, is that correct, like SCN8A DE, the indication?
So it's a good question, because there's some other other discussions that we have currently ongoing to see about, could we expand this? Is there other things that we could do within that? So the label's not set. We're obviously thinking about what that would look like with regulatory agencies, having those discussions, as we're moving towards that. But ultimately, and I think as Rikke had mentioned too, like when you see these drugs working in this way, in this fashion, to me it makes sense that we would consider other DEEs as well, who are still, because they're, in my mind, in my heart, I don't see why it wouldn't work in those, because we do see, upwards of 70 to 80% of DEs are treated with, sodium channel drugs, and we're just creating a better sodium channel drug, in my opinion, that would have that benefit as well.
Yeah, so I do a lot of physician education, right? So and so it's in that space, often the foundation for genetics is not that strong, So I think, are you considering in the next iteration of the trial to broaden the spectrum of SCN8A to show actually where it works and where it may work or maybe even not works, just to be a little bit more clear, what the range is of the efficacy? Yeah. Because not many physicians are really educated, and the choices to be made in the future, and also potentially the lack of efficacy which could happen before a drug was actually working, just because by giving it the wrong patients, is there any direction you guys are going to make that very clear for physicians who may not know what gain of function or loss of function and all these things are?
Yeah, so again, kind of looking at the gain of function component, making sure that they're seeing that, because what you would want, and again, it's kind of up for additional development in other DE component, because we could get a signal that it may be, just like in the healthy volunteers, if it's not having this major issue, there could be potential in different phenotypes, right? So to your point, we don't have the guidance on that yet, but it's something that we would, keep in mind and consideration. It's a good point. Awesome, thank you.
All right, I am now honored to introduce Tonya Baboneau. She is the mother of SCN8A warrior Natasha. Tonya joins us this evening to share a glimpse into her journey as an SCN8A caregiver and mother, offering us heartfelt insights from her experience. Tonya?
Thank you. I have a little video of Natasha from home. Just hit play.
Hi, my name is Natasha. I'm 12. And I am in grade 6, and I hate seizures because every time Mama walks, because every time when I get wobbly, my hand gets shaky, so Mommy and Daddy check on me, and when I sleep, I feel my seizure coming and I feel shaky. So Mommy and Daddy help me down the stairs when I feel wobbly and my whole body. And sometimes I'm scared because I want to stop these seizures, and my mom helped me out because I don't like seizures, and Daddy and Mommy and Dad and Ella calls me when I have a seizure. She yells, Mommy, when I have a seizure. And I hate seizures because I don't like seizures because when I sleep, because they always distract me They always distract me when I have a seizure every time. Bye.
Okay. So that is my daughter, Natasha, and she's the reason why I'm here and part of the reason why we are all here. I want to start by thanking you all. I'm so incredibly grateful for this community and the connections that I've made attending these conferences and through the family Facebook group. Knowing my family is not alone on this journey helps us through the dark days. I am here with my husband, David. We have 2 daughters back home, Natasha, who has an SCN8A mutation, and a 9-year-old daughter, Ella. Our house is full of love, adventures, and medical emergencies. We put each other first. David and I have grown stronger through all that we've been through. He's my best friend and my rock. We have love, respect, and trust in each other, all equally critical when raising a medically complex child. Natasha started having seizures when she was 4.5 months old. She's now 12 years old. She's a spunky preteen who loves adventures and people and not staying home. She really wanted to be here tonight, but she doesn't do so well with changes in routines and loud rooms and boring talking. Through all her difficulties and missing out, either due to her disabilities or her unstable health, she has found a true happiness in life, a gratitude and ability to appreciate and enjoy each moment. She has gross motor and fine motor disabilities. She can walk and talk, but sometimes uses a wheelchair. She has intellectual disabilities, ADHD, movement coordination disorder, motor tics, emotional dysregulation, sensory processing disorder, low tone, and seizures. In the past 12 months, she's had 48 tonic-clonic seizures and 120 focal motor seizures. I am her primary caregiver and her personal expert. We have an entire team of support, which I manage. Before Natasha came along, I was an accountant. I was career-driven, and my goal was to be a CFO one day. But I've not worked outside of the home since her birth. My husband's job is also very demanding, so we had to choose. One of us would stay home with Natasha. My life is profoundly different than I had pictured it would be. When you have a child with disabilities, some things don't change. I still want my daughter to be amazing and have friends and new adventures. And Natasha wants all of those things too. But it is difficult when she struggles with so many of the basic things we want for our children. Everything is difficult for her. Nothing came easy. Every single thing she's accomplished is because she's made the decision to do it and has worked for it. I continue to be on a pendulum between grief and acceptance, discovering it is possible to feel both at the same time. I grieve the life I thought I would have and the things she will never be able to do. Sometimes the grief hits when I least expect it. But I am so grateful for this life. It's beautiful and it's difficult, but it's mine. I'm so grateful for Natasha. She is such an incredible gift to our family. I feel so blessed that I'm the one that gets to know her and get to see the world through her lens. When she started having seizures and I learned more about SCN8A, it caused me to question everything. How can a body be designed to self-destruct? What is the definition of a successful life? How do we accept her limitations and at the same time support her with intensive therapies? And how do I convince a world that values winning and competition that my daughter's life matters and is important? There are different aspects of her disabilities as a caregiver. Supporting her gross motor disabilities are physically exhausting. My husband and I have literally carried her up a mountain. The intellectual disabilities and her behaviors can be mentally exhausting, but the seizures are by far the most world-shattering, heart-wrenching part of her diagnosis. They pull the rug out from under us, they weaken her, they steal her independence, personality, and spunk. They come at any time, anywhere, with no way to predict them or prevent them, taking over our day and canceling our plans. After a seizure, she requires assistance walking, eating, going to the bathroom, and can only speak a few words. She needs lots of rest and snuggles on the couch. I also balance my attention with Ella, who sees how much I do for Natasha. I do my best to make sure Ella feels she is loved and important. Ella sometimes feels like the older sister or like an only child, but they have the most beautiful relationship and love each other immensely. On the good days, we do our best as a family to enjoy life and experience the world. We don't not plan things because she might have a seizure, which means lots of times our plans get changed when she does. We all go skiing and swimming, hiking, biking, and snorkeling. We try not to limit what Natasha can experience. If there is a way to adapt an activity, we are going for it. We find our own way and we make our own path. Natasha loves to get out of the house and go on adventures. Sometimes I worry that we push her too hard or that we overdo it. This past spring at Disney World, we stayed late to watch the fireworks as the park was closing, and we usually never stay up late. As we were fighting our way through the crowds towards the exit gates, Natasha had a seizure. I started to blame myself, as moms do. Maybe it was a bad idea. But I knew we could have left early and missed the fireworks, and she still might have had a seizure in bed at the hotel. I reminded myself that there are only so many things that I can control, and we have the choice to sit it out or live. We chose to say yes to a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Each seizure turns our world upside down. I will never be immune. I worry she won't start breathing again. I worry about how long it will be to get her back to her baseline, or how long until I get my little girl back. I worry she will cluster, or we will need to call 911. I worry about how much she will miss out on. I worry how much time we will get with her before she leaves this world. But each seizure makes me want to dig in my heels, advocate, fight, and research, because even one less seizure a year will be one less day she misses out on life. And as we sit at home snuggling on the couch, life keeps moving on without us. It can feel very lonely and helpless stuck in those moments. She has a very different outlook on life because of her struggles and all that she misses out on. She knows she will always come in last place in any race, real or metaphorical. She never cares about the competition or winning. She cares about the people that are beside her along the way. She empathizes when someone is upset or not feeling well. She's found happiness in the simple things in life, love, relationships, and experiences. She's not striving for perfection or angered by unfairness. She is grateful to be present and to be able to contribute. I have learned to slow down and be patient and understanding. I have learned life is not a sprint, but a marathon. We go at her pace, what she is up for, her ability, and how she's feeling that day. In addition to taking care of Natasha and my family, I prioritize care for myself. No one takes care of me except for me, and if I neglect my needs, I feel myself falling apart, and then no one gets the care they need. I take time to check in and reconnect with myself each day. I have realized that even through it all, she is going to be okay. We are all going to be okay. No matter how much I worry or all the bad that we deal with, she has determined she wants to live and experience life, and I need to let her. She is vulnerable and extra fragile, but she is a fighter, and there's so much in my world that I do not control. I don't know what she will be capable of as she grows older. Her future is incredibly uncertain, which makes my future uncertain, but I've learned to embrace all of that uncertainty. Natasha has taught me what truly matters. Each night when we say prayers, she tells me how much she loves me and that she will always be in my heart. Her neurons may have some major design flaws, but her soul is truly remarkable. Her joy is contagious. And taking those moments to just be her mom and see her for the amazing girl she is, with no expectations, no worries about the unknown, those are the best moments, and those are life's gifts. And I try to create as many of them as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Tonya, for sharing your story, but also sharing Natasha with us tonight. I would now like to welcome Manoj back up stage, and we are going to move on to our 3 final professional presentations.
Thank you. So the next speaker needs no introduction. It is Michael Hammer, who is the director of the genetics course at the University of Arizona and also Shay's father. Michael? He's going to give us an update on the research roadmap for SCN8A. That was a meeting that took place in Boston in the summer.
It's hard to follow, Tonya, but it's hard to follow all of you. I'm in a unique position because I hear all of your stories, so many of you, through my many conversations. And so as a scientist on one hand and as a parent on the other, I think that inspired partially what I'm going to talk about tonight, which is we've come so far on the science and the clinical aspects of this in 12 years, but we're not far enough. And so the question is, how do we take progress that is rapid and make it jump even faster, leapfrog? Is that even possible? And that's the dream at the top that we wanted to see if we could achieve at this meeting. And so let me just get acquainted with this device here. A research roadmap is you want to have the experts in the room identify the core gaps that prevent progress in an area. And you want to have a strategizing system to find research priorities to fill those gaps, to advance the field. In this meeting, we really centered it around families, caregivers. Caregivers gave us their concerns. And it was up to the clinicians, the scientists, biotech in the room to respond to those caregivers' concerns. So just like this meeting here, and always every year with this wonderful gathering, we have the families telling us their perspective, and then the scientists and the clinicians telling us what they're trying to do. We're all heroes, we're all learning and doing the best we can, but how do we make it go faster? Going the wrong way. Which one do I turn? Which one do I hit? The opposite? I'm sorry, I'm such a loser. Oh, that one, that's... All right, so I just want to get right out there who the participants of this meeting were and thank the organizers. Madeleine, her husband, Chris Burge, hosted this meeting in Boston and helped pay for it and helped organize it. And we owe a lot of gratitude to them. The other organizers are the International SCN8A Alliance and Gabi and Mark Fitzgerald at CHOP and myself and Jayetta Hecker, and there's Madeleine up there as well. The working groups, which I'll tell you how we got to these working groups, but we planned them a little bit ahead of meeting in the room. We had 2 days, and we had this brilliant group of people for 2 days, so we wanted to spike the meeting by having surveys given out ahead of time and answered, and then use that to design a roadmap before we even got in the room to see if we could really make enough rapid progress. And it was it was at MIT and Chris's home institution, and again, sponsored by the International SCN8A Alliance, which is I should clarify that, as Hillary said in the beginning, there was a small number of families that came together when we discovered our children had this terrible situation. Facebook group started, Julianne, and then we as siblings in that early days, we grew up and we diversified, and we've all been able to go in our directions of where we're good at helping, and you guys are good at working with us. But the scientific branch came out of that early group, and this advocacy and this wonderful work that the TCSF is doing came out of that. And we're kind of making a big loop and making a heart shape as we come back together and go forward in the future. We have great plans to work on things together. I'm really excited about it. Anyway, this is just the slide that, you know, kind of summarizes all the progress we've made since 2012 when we published the gene as causing epilepsy. And you can see that we had the registry started soon. On the top level, we had a mouse model by 2015, thanks to Miriam Meisler's lab. We had the first ASO in Miriam's lab. And then this wonderful, wonderful opportunity that's being brought to us by the hard work at Praxis and Neurocrine. We have the Kayak study, phase 2. We just heard about the Embold phase 2 and 3 studies. We are blessed as a community to have these hardworking pharmaceutical groups working on our behalf to come up with something that we think looks very promising from all parts of it. And then we have below, we have the advocacy groups, you know, Wishes for Elliot, TCSF, the Shama Hammer Foundation, all these things. Registry Court, publishing. We had our first IPSC published in 2020. We have global leaders alliances. We have people all over the world working on our behalf. And recently, the Alliance also sponsored a 2-year study to come up with a consensus on how to diagnose, treat SCN8A, because there is no guidelines, but now there is. So we made that next step. Dozens of publications have come out over the years since 2012, 463 when I looked at PubMed. These cohort studies and case reports ended up defining the full spectrum of this disorder. Elena's group and Rikke's group in Denmark have played a huge role in this to describe the spectrum and treatment response and so on and so forth, everything you've heard about. The scientists working in the laboratories have come up with models, animal models, cellular models, all of that's happened. And we didn't have any talks today on the scientific laboratory stuff, but I'll give you a hint of some of the things that we're thinking about. So, despite all this great progress, the disease mechanism is not fully understood. We have to be able to understand that through our models in the laboratory. The medicines, the anti-seizure medicines are inadequate. We know that. They're not selective. Polypharmacy, which most of us are on, is not well studied. We don't know what to mix with what. It's hit or miss. Treatments for non-seizure phenotypes and comorbidities are lacking. This is one of the things that came out of the meeting that was such a big issue, is that we don't know much about the non-seizure outcomes and the phenotypes. And do we have models to be able to study them? We don't have strategies to deal with a high premature death rate. We lack biomarkers to track disease progression and treatment response. In other words, there are molecular and other neuroimaging things we can do to study the progression of a disease and to see if those things are responding to treatment. We don't have those in our field. We need those. So I'm kind of giving you the bottom line first, but those are the reasons why we need a roadmap. It was a way of getting multi-stakeholder collaboration, working together, and coming up with this way forward. So the stakeholders were, as I said, caregivers. 175 caregivers responded to our survey, went out before the meeting. We had 46 clinician responses, we had 23 scientist responses, and Chris Burge interviewed 8 biotech companies for their perspective. They were asked to identify gaps and promising areas forward. Okay, I'm going to give you just one slide each from each stakeholder. So this is the caregiver survey. We asked, what are the top 5 challenges for quality of life? And as you can see on the left, at the top, we've got seizures, but seizures, rank pretty high, but you can see cognition, speech, motor, sleep, behavior, a lot of the things we've been talking about tonight. Those come out in the survey. Many other comorbidities and challenges, but those are sort of the top ones. Then we asked the clinicians, rank the importance of 10 comorbidities that you feel need further research to improve quality of life for caregivers. And you can see what they had said without seeing the caregiver responses. Sleep disturbances, movement disorders, speech and communication, behavioral, emotional issues, motor issues, those all were among the top in our caregiver concerns. So that's really good that the clinicians are ranking some of the things we care most about as their priorities as well. The scientists who work in the laboratory have models, and I'm not asking what their priorities, I'm not showing you what their priorities are here. It took a lot longer to kind of work through all the aspects of what the scientists are doing. But this one, and I thank Madeleine for making these slides look pretty, the importance of the different models, if you were to rank the importance to fill the research, the knowledge gaps through research, targeted therapies for seizures are important. Disease mechanisms for gain of function, disease mechanisms for loss of function, targeted therapies for non-seizures, model development for non-seizures, and model development for seizures ranked in importance. But you can see the crisscrossing lines. The feasibility of doing these things did not come out in the same order. So although we have important goals in mind, our feasibility for pulling those off in the laboratory don't always align. So that was a big part of the discussion. Then what I did before the meeting was I took all the survey results and I tried to integrate them to see where were the points of agreement and how well did each of the stakeholders respond to the caregivers. Again, the caregivers being the central theme, the central players. So the points of agreements, the clinician responsiveness, the scientist responsiveness, some of the things that were very important points of agreement were on seizures versus non-seizure outcomes, comorbidities, gene therapies versus conventional medicines, novel medicines, ASMs, and research models. So all of these things were part of the integration of these different surveys. And out of this sort of integration, you can see these common themes. We ended up proposing 5 working groups. And these were unanimously adopted by the participants in the room in Boston. And I think it would be really interesting, actually, to have everyone who was at that meeting in Boston raise their hand just to show how many of us were part of this. Notice how many caregivers are raising their hands and how many laboratory and clinician folks are raising their hands. Elena, your hand should be up. Anyway, these are the 5 working groups that broke out and spent time discussing these topics. The first one, led by Madeleine and Wen-Chi from Miriam's lab, was advancing transformative therapeutics, development and delivery. This includes everything we've heard about in terms of new drugs, small molecules, modulators of the channel, as well as genetic therapies. Where do we stand? How do we progress? And so the slide is showing that what some of the goals were: develop transformative therapies that are effective in reducing seizure burden and with fewer adverse side effects. And the elephant in the room, as we discussed, is how well, if we do correct the channel through these different approaches, how well do we rescue all these other non-seizure outcomes? So that was a very big part of it and part of the goals of that group. The second group, working group 2, non-seizure outcomes, mechanisms, management, and therapies. How do we do a better job of understanding the multiple non-seizure morbidities that are of significant and concern to caregivers? The goal is to better understand the physiology of non-seizure outcome and advance best practices for treatment and management. I'm only giving you the very outlines. There are very much more detailed goals from each of these groups that I can't take the time to show you. And then the third working group is, what do we do today to improve current therapeutics? The first line, adjunctive, combination, and alternative approaches. So is there some way that we can take the information we have from clinicians, and from caregivers today and do something different and better to make that more effective. And so I'll tell you a little bit about what we plan to do in Working Group 3 in the next slide after this. The fourth working group is the biomarkers working group. As I described, we don't have biomarkers, these independent objective measures of how a disease progresses by looking at a blood level, by looking at an EEG, by looking at a neuroimage. Those kinds of biomarkers not only would help us see how a disease progresses, but also how it could respond to treatment. We need more of that, and there was a plan that was developed at the meeting to go forward with that research. And the fifth one is really interesting and really important and very integrative. We called it whole body, whole brain, to study regions, cell types, circuitry, neuromodulation, and epileptic body, the epileptic body. So what is meant by that? We know that the entire body is affected by those who have seizures. And some people have epileptic encephalopathy, some people have developmental encephalopathy, some people have both. And so the question is, why is that happening, and what are the mechanisms that underlie that, and how do we do a better job of understanding those mechanisms, specifically when we do give novel treatments or transformative therapeutics? How do we see the effect globally at the level of the brain, the central nervous system, and in the whole body? So those were some of the major points that came out in the 5 working groups. If you want to see the full poster with more details, here's the QR code. I'm going to stand in front of a poster at AES on Sunday. And finally, just to say what I'm hoping, we've already started some projects that came directly out of this meeting. We just purchased a license for a daily seizure diary that I want to give to as many families that will use it. We will be able to track when you, on a daily basis, what your simple questions like, did your child have a seizure today? How long did it last? Did you use a rescue medication, et cetera? And we can get the daily data on a daily granular level and try to integrate the data from you as a user of that diary with electronic medical records that come from your clinician, with the registry prospective study that we would like to do. So somewhat like Elena's idea, but it would be more about getting granular seizure tracking from individuals on a daily basis, integrating that in with electronic medical records. That directly came from the workshop. We are moving forward on it, and if people are interested in getting this app, it's free to you, and I'd be very interested in speaking with you anytime next day or so.
Okay, thank you so much, Michael. That was wonderful. So we have time for just one question because we are running.
Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great. Michael's going to be around if anybody does have questions for him later. So it's a great pleasure to introduce the new kid on the block. We're not talking about Cenobomate, we're talking about Jeremy Prokop. I first met Jeremy at this meeting. I'd never met him before, and he is going to tell us a little bit about scaling variance to cell resolution. Thank you, Jeremy.
All right. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to come today and talk, but really thank you for embracing me. I work in a lot of different rare diseases, and the community here, several of the families, they don't take no for an answer. And I think that's what's so important about these groups, is to engage the scientists and tell us what you all need. And I think that was what's so cool about that Boston meeting, was a chance for us to really kind of start thinking. And so I was on that 5th working group, and I think some of what you're going to see in this is going to be built off of that as well. All right, so before I start, I do want to throw some acknowledgments. I want to thank the many clinicians and scientists and students, especially my graduate student Jacob, who really did a lot of this work. But more so thanking the superheroes, the patients themselves, and their sidekicks, the caregivers, who really make all this possible. They trust us with so much data and so much sensitive information. And I think that as I've worked in these rare diseases, it's a very unique space that not many researchers really get to see, that real partnership, and it's really what research should be. And then also the funders. Anybody that's a Pittsburgh fan knows AccuSure. They love to put their name on things, but they also want to put their name on rare diseases. And so they've really helped us at Cornwall Health build a rare disease center that embraces challenging variants, challenging phenotypes. The challenging things that you all see, we want to try to understand those. And so, again, I'm the new kid on the block. Many of you probably have no idea who I am. I don't really study epilepsies and seizures. But I kind of started off working for the Undiagnosed Disease Network sequencing team. And as we started doing genome after genome of rare disease patients, we realized how much complexity there was and the need for ultra-rapid characterization pipelines. How do we make sense of variants that we have no idea what these things are? First patient ever to be seen with this syndrome or that syndrome. And so we started developing tools and strategies to do this. And over the years, I've gained a reputation. People often call me Inspector Gadget, because whatever I can get, I'm going to throw at these types of projects, whether that's doing more sequencing work and applying our sequencing tools, using whatever animal system we can use. So our lab uses rats and ferrets and pigs, and we even do some sheep work, which is very expensive stuff. And they are very adorable, but very hard to work with. You have to have some serious muscles to get them to go anywhere they want. We also use stem cells, induced pluripotent stem cells, and we can make whatever type of tissues we want because, again, we never know what we're going to work on tomorrow. But what really powers us is our computation, what we can do in a computer. Our lab's motto is to connect the dots. And one of the first cases I ever worked on as part of the UDN, I get a variant on Friday, and I'm told we need to make some decision very fast. By Monday, when I think I had something worked up, I find out that the patient had passed away. And that was the moment, that was the realization, these tools have to be very fast. We've got to think, and so data is so important. So a lot of what you're going to hear about in this is how do we take something from our working group in Boston and go to the data and try to understand this. So how did I get into SCN8A? It was actually a family. And Angel Hernandez, who is a pediatric neurologist at Cornwall Health at Helen DeVos Children's Hospital, sends me an email and says, can we help characterize this variant at position 1309? That's an arginine to a leucine. And it's a question of, is it a gain of function, a loss of function? And many of you in the room know who this is. I will leave it to them to tell. But what is this? It's the first time it's ever been seen. So, how do we make sense of that? And I've worked on a couple of these types of projects, and what we typically will do is say, well, this gene might be unique. It's similar. We've heard this already, SCN2A, SCN5A, all these other sodium channels. Well, does this same exact variant exist in one of those? And can we make tools that can take one gene, make sense of it, and then somehow interpret some of that? And so we start developing these tools. We take and whatever species we can get for every sodium channel, we start saying at every single spot, what does it look like? And put that into a computer. We take protein structures. So Dennis's group, others that work in this area as well, we can take structures and look at them. We can watch how the atoms move around and use these really cool computers. And then we try to bring this all together. So we can start seeing, well, this variant sits in this pocket. It interacts with these things. It's not only in SCN8A, but it's the same amino acid in every other sodium channel. And it's deeply conserved, which then that starts opening the door. Once I know it's conserved, I can go start asking questions. What other variants might show up in those others that are similar? Very small font, I'm realizing. But those two in red, that is the same exact variant in SCN2A and SCN5A. And in 2A, there have been 4 patients seen with it. And in 5A, there's been 2. In 5A, it is also a challenging variant. That field has said, we actually don't know there either, but we're seeing it. And so it starts telling us that we're seeing some overlapping themes between the sodium channels. There are challenging variants that not only this group is facing, but they're facing, and we need to come together and really tackle this. And so then I'm at Boston, and that kind of precipitated it, and Michael is, starting to rope me in and saying, what can we do? And working with Josh and others, getting us the registry with all the variants, and we can start then saying, with all of the variants in the registry, what do the other sodium channels have at those same positions as well? And so we can look at sites like those in the red, where every single sodium channel has the same exact amino acid. at that position. And we could start saying, well, okay, there's a balance of loss of function and gain of function. There's a handful of unknowns at those positions. So even the sites that are conserved across all of these, we still don't really know how they behave sometimes on the protein. And then we can start, once we know those sites that are conserved, we can go in and start saying, how many times do we see the exact same variant in the other channels? Not even drifting or like some other different change, the exact same change. And you're seeing dozens of them. And then if you start looking, that bottom chart there, right here, those in red, these are variants that are already annotated as pathogenic and likely pathogenic. Some of them are gain of function, loss of function. But just like we mentioned with the other variant, oh, sorry, I pressed the wrong button, many of these are also very challenging variants, things that we don't really know. So again, the fields are really seeing the same thing. Again, connecting the dots, that's our theme of our lab. And so here's just a list of some of those variants that show up repeatedly with the same exact change across multiple of the proteins. And you can again see a diversity of gain of function and loss of function, and also some that are unknown. So this kind of is where we got started, but then after the meeting in Boston, we really started talking a lot about these non-seizure phenotypes. And this is something my lab really tries to do, is to say, can we figure out the mechanisms that exist behind some of these more diverse phenotypes that families might be having, and especially those non-seizure phenotypes. And at the same time, I've been going through my own personal challenges with my immune system targeting the cells that surround my neurons. And I have to say, like, I'm a card-carrying physiologist, right? I should be able to explain these things, and I can't explain them. And so when I'm at the doctors and I'm trying to say, well, this is what's happening, I can't imagine, trying to do this without my level of knowledge. It's crazy how complex these are, especially when it's not just your brain, when it's all your other neurons. And so how do we start bringing together our data to characterize this? And so this is where it gets a little sciencey. This is essentially a chart that every one of these red spots is a tissue sample from different types of tissues, looking at each of the sodium channels across all of the human tissues. And what you can see is, if we look at this red box here, these red spots, that's the brain expression of SCN8A, right? That's why we study this in the brain so much. It's so obvious that it's there. But if we start looking at these little teeny tiny red dots in here, each one represents one cell within that brain. And what you can see is SCN8A, almost every cell is lighting up. It's so obvious that it's there. But as you start thinking, what if I only have a few dots in another tissue that are these red, right? How do we study those? We need these new tools that are coming along to really embrace and understand that. And so that's what we started digging into. So for example, the size of this circle represents how many cells within each of these tissue make SCN8A. So you can see the brain right there, it's a big circle, right? But other tissues, the circle's there and it's smaller. And so we can actually start going in and looking at the subtypes of cells within each of these tissues that make it. And so what you start seeing are things like neural cells in the stomach that are making SCN8A. What do those do? You start asking these questions. And so we started building these larger lists. And so out of 100 million cells that have been sequenced to date, looking at expression of these genes, we have about 4,000 different cell types in the human body. And this is essentially showing how much of SCN8A do we see and how many of those cell types, how many of those cells within that cell type express it. And in red there's the brain. But what I want you to note are the black dots, right? There's a bunch of other spots that a whole bunch of those cells make it. So what are those cells? And I think this is where I can already see dots connecting from all the talks today in this wonderful meeting. Start looking at this, right? Spinal cord and eye, those are pretty obvious ones. I think we all kind of would anticipate, right? And this is just throwing out the red dots, and then we're leaving all of the other black dots in here. But what's really shocking are some of these, like the neuroendocrine cells in the mucosa, the neuroendocrine cells in the stomach, the sympathetic neuron to the adrenal gland. We literally just heard about sleeping and how it regulates the HPA axis. I didn't know that was going to be presented, and that is one of the top points on here. What does that nerve do? Why is SCN8A there? Is that the connection that nerve is doing something that it's not supposed to in these patients? And then we can also see things like the enteric nerve going into the stomach. Not every nerve to every organ is actually expressing this. It's very unique in where they are. And it's not just SCN8A. I'm a systems biology guide too. So we don't just think about SCN8A, but all the other genes that regulate it. And so this big plot here are all the different genes that work with SCN8A, and we can look at the expression of all of those, and you start seeing those same cell types, that entire cluster of all the SCN8A regulation machinery is also there. So what are these cells and how do they work? And I think that feeds into new testable hypotheses to go back into the lab. We have all these new tools to start thinking about these diverse phenotypes and what cell types they might be working on, and thinking about it not just in terms of SCN8A, but all the sodium channels and this bigger view of how these things work. And starting to narrow down into some of those neuroendocrine cells and the peripheral nerves and asking questions about what they do. Can we use mouse models? Can we essentially use stem cells, induced pluripotent stem cells, where we can make those cell types and study in the lab? And not just that, but can we study what in the environment? We hear constantly from the families, things like infections make this worse. Eating certain things may make it worse. Can we essentially use those cell systems to study this now that we actually have these detailed hypotheses? So thank you for allowing me to talk, and I think there's probably maybe time for questions, probably not.
Michael?
All right, so you hit on something really important. The elephant in the room is, if we correct the gene, do we rescue all these other non-seizure outcomes? One hypothesis is that, as Brian was hinting at, that when seizures get better, things get better all over. What you're hinting at, I think, is that there is expression of SCN8A in other body parts, and so if I were to target the brain only, I might miss something that I need to hit.
Yes.
So I'll leave
that.
That.
Yeah, I think that's what the data kind of supports is we have these new cell atlases that are actually invested in by Facebook, right? All of those tools I actually presented was Chan Zuckerberg, so Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, their investments. Those tools really do start pointing to this has more roles than just in the brain, just in the spinal cord. And I think the question becomes is how do we, if we use gene therapy or we correct some of these, is it going to correct everything? As we start thinking about sleep, we've heard melatonin and others, are there targeted things to those nerves that go to the adrenal glands? Can we start thinking about that as a targeted aspect? I think there's a lot to learn still, and those databases are growing very fast. And I think we're just going to continue to see more and more signals that kind of give us some insights.
Okay, thank you so much, Jeremy. So we have our final speaker of tonight, and that is Haley Dame. And she is a PhD candidate at Tufts University in Madeleine's lab, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the development of ASOs to treat SCN8A epilepsy. Thank you, Haley.
Awesome. So I also have Hema here with me, and she's going to be giving a lot of the talk today as well. So she start us off. This is the good.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for staying up with us. I know a lot of you have jet lag. We're going to be fast. It's going to be great, and we'll answer some of your questions about the whole genomics part of it, hopefully. But as Haley mentioned, my name is Hema Kopalle. I am also a graduate student at UCSD, and we're going to talk to you today about an interdisciplinary project that we've been working on for the past year and a bit, specifically trying to develop a screen and a targeted treatment for a single patient who has SCN8A-DE, very specifically Madeleine's daughter, Margot. So when we first sequenced Margot's genome to try and figure out where was that mutation, we first identified that she has a gain-of-function mutation of a serine 217P, meaning that we have a biochemical shift over there. But the location was very, very interesting to us because it was in exon 5 of SCN8A. And when we look at where exon 5 is, it is that red region over there, which is in one of the voltage sensing domains. But more importantly, when we look at other exon 5 variants in the databases, it's not an uncommon locus to have these kinds of mutations. But what we were very interested in is with Margot's mutation, it's very specifically splicing focused. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. When we think back, not on the protein level, but the RNA, before it becomes that, we have our multiple exons here of 4, 5N, 5A, and 6. And what this means is in our two colors, we have actually two variations of SCN8A. We have in blue 5N. This is the neonatal version. This is a version of SCN8A that is highly expressed before birth in early development. And what happens is over maturation and development to birth in about like 6 months, we have a shift from this neonatal version to that red one over there, 5A, the adult version. And so this is a developmental splicing switch that happens very specifically in exon 5. One of the ways that we can try and manipulate and modulate splicing, so not the protein, but the splicing part of it, is by something called an antisense oligonucleotide, an ASO. This is similar to like mRNA vaccines and things, where we have a small nucleotide sequence that can then bind to our exon of interest. And because it is binding, we then have that manipulation of the overall protein product later. What that specifically looks like is the ASOs that we wanted to develop would bind specifically to Margot's mutation, take over and kind of manipulate the endogenous cell machinery and say, hey, can you make more of our appropriate version, please and thank you. So let's think back to what that model looked like again, right? We have our two versions, the neonatal and the adult, right? And we have Margot's mutation here, indicated by that lightning bolt. We wanted to, again, try and reduce that. So what Haley ended up doing was designing a whole panel of ASOs to bind very specifically to that region, both on the mutation and adjacent, because we wanted to find what is the best possible location to create this targeted ASO that would only affect 5N and not 5A. Because remember, we wanted to get more of this adult version, since that would help what our overall phenotype is. How do we take that big screening idea and actually get it from the lab into Margot and into any sort of patient overall? So we take a multimodal strategy here. The first being is that screening, because screening is very difficult and expensive. We then are going to take those candidate ASOs from our first screen and put them into a patient iPSC-derived model. And so what this means is that we can take Margot cells, trick them into being stem cells, and then repeat our screen over and over, not in her, but in the cell version of it. And at the same time, because cells are different from a whole body, do this in a mouse model. So we have two ways of looking in the lab at our screen, what is the best possible candidate? Once we have candidates, we can then move that over into toxicology, which is what we would typically see in normal pharmacological and industry-style targeting of these things. But it's just Haley and me, so we're going to be as efficient as possible. And then lastly, the thing that we are not equipped to do, but can then hand off, is what are the best possible targets that we've found, ones that we know will work in both our mouse model and in the patient cells themselves. And so let's start by looking at that switch overall from that neonatal to the adult version. Haley put together this massive screen of all those little ASOs, tiling them over and over and over again. And we can see in this graph over here, if we look at the very left one over here, this is a cell line in which we have very high 5N, so very high neonatal version, which mimics Margot's phenotype overall. And that's our baseline there. We have tested this in multiple different cell types. What we were looking for our winning candidates was an ASO that would ideally reduce that 5N and have an increase in 5A without also having adverse effects on the 5A level. Because again, these are two separate versions, but we don't want a drug that will target both of them. That would be bad. So what we then did is once we found our series of candidates, we decided to try them again in those patient cell lines. So what that means is we take a skin biopsy, the same one that we used essentially for those genotyping studies, trick them into being stem cells, because stem cells can become anything, and then take those stem cells and manipulate them into becoming neurons. This is called induced pluripotent neurons, which we can use in multiple different models, multiple different systems. What this means for me is that I can then screen all of these different candidates that Haley is giving me and also confirm, am I seeing actual neurons? And what we can see over here in those cortical-like neurons that we've developed is these are those neurons, those patient neurons. And we have our SCN8A over here, and it's overlapping with our neuron. So yes, we are making neurons. They have Margot's genotype, and they seem to be expressing SCN8A at the correct spot, so over by the axon. Ooh, there we go. Then what we can do is check them to see what is the electrical activity, because we have all of that genotyping data, we have all of the RNA data, but what about the actual bursting and the activity? And so what we're seeing here, the S217P, those are Margot's cells essentially, and I put them onto an electrode. So each of these little dots is a firing activity, essentially. And we can compare them at 2 different time points, early in development, approximately, versus later. And we can already see that with the S217P mutation, there is higher excitation. They seem to be firing a lot more, a lot sooner compared to our control line. When we take them out and grow them out a little bit longer, our control line starts to catch up, but still not enough. And so this tells us that we're replicating the same phenotype over there. So whatever ASO we're able to use to try and treat it, we ideally will see both a change on the RNA level and ideally on the phenotype level. And what you can see also on that graph on your right is the quantification of that same activity we're seeing in those bursting patterns. One of the ways that we can also try and check this then in terms of quantitation is just counting what is the firing rate? How many times is it firing? And that's where our first set of testing for the Haley's ASOs came in. And what we can see here is this purple line way up here. Those are the untreated neurons that we have from Margot. When we add 2 of our candidate ASOs and compare them to the wild type, we see almost a restoration of that phenotype, which is really, really promising because we're able to make sure that the ASO that we are doing, that we have bespoke designed for Margot, will actually work on her cells. Granted, we haven't tried it in her yet, but this is extremely promising, at least for the subcellular level. But that's not quite enough. We still need to see what will it do in terms of overall phenotype, because this isn't really seizure activity just yet. And so Haley will take over for that part.
Yes, so what we did is we had this novel mouse model generated for us, and we lovingly called this the Margot mouse before it arrived. And so this mouse is, and the mice when we talk about are all heterozygous for this mutation. And they have the serine 217 proline mutation within them. And they have a very, very reduced survival, and they're a very severe phenotype of SCN8A, with the mice living on average for only 20 days. So it's a very short lifespan. And they start to lose weight at this age of like P15, and it continues to significantly drop off until their death at around that age of P20. And what we see is, you can see with some video recordings that we have done, you can see that the mice have this seizure-like behavior where they have this erratic movement that is occurring in this little container while they're being recorded. And this starts to happen around P15, and again will continue up until their death as well. And not only do they have this seizure-like behavior, but they also have a motor disorder, which you see in a lot of the patients with SCN8A, and we see in Margot as well. And so here you can see on the left, we have our wild-type mice, and they just normally just sit, hang out, groom. But on the right, you see what our mutant mouse looks like, and it is unable to really hold itself upright, and it has a lot of flopping that occurs or splayed legs and whatnot. And we're thinking this is a hypotonia phenotype that we're seeing in our mice with having low muscle mass. And we see that this also starts occurring at around P15, which again corresponds with when the seizure onset is that we're seeing. And as well, that also corresponds to when they start losing weight at that weaning age of P15. So now that we have our mice characterized, we've seen this great in vitro data from Hema, we can now test our ASOs in our mouse model. And so by ICV injection, we tested at 60 microgram dose. And we see that compared to our ASO, our mutants with our control, treated with ASO control, they are all dying by P21. And we were able to significantly extend life with our ASO 13. So right now we're at about 25% survival at P60. The mice, we do SAC at P60, but we would expect that they could possibly live longer. So this is really exciting for us. It is 25%, but you know, any increase is positive. And we also see that although our mice do lose weight at this weaning age, which also happens with our control treated mice, they're able to recover their weight by around P40. And additionally, they do spend less time on their backer side as well. So in conclusion, we are able to see that we have these ASOs that are really successful in vitro in modulating alternative splicing of SCN8A, exon 5. And we also can see in our characterization, both in vitro and in vivo, that we have models that have an increase in neuronal firing and also a mouse model that has seizures and a reduced survival. And we are able to correct some of that with our ASOs. So we can reduce spontaneous firing in the iPSCs and eye neurons, and we can also extend survival in our mouse model. So in the future, we want to continue to increase our N with treating more mice. We also want to potentially use other ASOs that we have in our pipeline to treat our mice as well. And then continue on in working with NLORM with some of the tox studies and share our data with them as well so that they can help with these NF1 trials for the patients. And this is really a group effort for those in the Oudin lab, Madeleine's lab, and also the doula lab also at Tufts who help with all the mouse work, and of course the Yo lab where Hema is doing all the eye neuron work. So thank you. We'll take any questions.
Any questions? There's one. We got one question.
After the first seizure, would they have more?
Yeah, so we're doing, since they're so young, we're not taking them away from the mother for too long. It really depends on the mice. Some of them we've seen we're only recording for 10 minutes at a time. So that's really hard to gauge how many seizures they're having. But I mean, for some mice, not all recorded. I've seen them have 5 or 6 seizures. But again, that's in such short amounts of times that it's really hard to say what that actually means. But we also have done EEG on some adult mice, some of the ones that were able to live longer, and they're having a lot of seizures a day. They can have 10 seizures a day. Not every day is the same, but they do have a lot of seizures.
And then if you can tell, what's the longest duration of a seizure that would look like maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes?
Oh, no. The seizures on average last 40 seconds. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for all of our presenters this evening, and also a huge thank you to Minaj for moderating again this year. And I just wanted to point out he was also around from day one. And when we look around this room, we see a lot of people that are in our community, and you are also considered family in this community. Also, if you've seen Dr. John Schreiber out there in AES World, tell him he was very much missed. He sent me an email last night saying how sad he was that he wasn't able to come this evening because he also usually co-hosts with Minaj. But he's doing what we want him to do, which is going out there and working. Most of you that are at AES, you're double booked most of the time. And unfortunately, there was this very important meeting that he needed to be at. So if you see him, tell him we missed him. And we appreciate him always being a supporter of our community as well. I also want to thank our 2 platinum sponsors, Neurocrine Biosciences and Praxis Precision Medicines. We could not do this without your support. We greatly appreciate it. We also had Praxis sponsor our virtual portion of the programming, so we were able to live stream and record tonight and tomorrow for our families and professionals that were unable to make the trip tonight. So before we close, some of you probably know we have the CUTIES Awards. So after the first SCN8A Clinician, Researcher, and Family Gathering held in 2015, the CUTIES syndrome saw a handful of individuals that were really just rising to the opportunity to work collaboratively. And as a result, we created CUTIES. And this stands for Champions for Understanding, Treating, Investigating, and Empowering Those with SCN8A. We have 3 CUTIES awards this year, 1 researcher, 1 clinician, and 1 family member. I will be presenting the researcher award today. This probably is no surprise in this room that our researcher award goes to Dr. Dennis Law. He's like, what? Dr. Dennis Lahl is an associate professor and director for the Center of Neurogenics at UT Health Houston. He's renowned for his groundbreaking work in neurogenics. Dr. Lahl's career has been dedicated to advancing personalized medicine through innovative research. He did a presentation in 2021 at our SCN8A gathering, and you're kind of stuck with us now. This year, actually, Dr. Lahl and his UT Health team, say hi, everybody. We have UT Health team over there. We were able to give their team a grant, which allowed them to come here and actually work with our SCN8A kiddos and their siblings. They got to wear some wearable devices, do some neuro assessment, communication assessments, and we're going to hit you up and see if we can expand that to some more people that want to participate at home. So, Dennis, thank you so much. And here is your lovely award.
Say one word?
Yes, absolutely.
So just one word, so I don't do anything. So a lot of good collaborators and strong team here, so really, really important. And just one thing is for all the parents here, right? So what is ultra important is, the personal impressions you share is just, this is just so much fuel for us who are not living your lives. So, we're doing actually a pretty boring job and have to sit long hours every day behind desks or in labs. And just listening to your stories once a year fuels a lot of energy all year. And it's really thankful for sharing. And I'm so happy that also many members of my team are here who can really expose this. And I see everyone's really emotional. And I know when I say next week, no vacation, right, working hard, everyone will say yes, so thank you.
All right, I would now like to introduce Shelly Frappier. She is the TCSF Director of Patient Engagement and Data Management, and Nico's mom, to present the Clinician Award.
Thank you for bearing with us. We always run over, and we tried really hard this time to keep it nice and short and let you out by 9:30, but I'm sorry. The Clinician Award goes to Dr. Roberto Previtali. Dr. Previtali was nominated by Cinzia Scarcelli, the founder and president of the SCN8A European Federation and mother to SCN8A warrior Aaron. Cinzia's nomination said it best. Dr. Previtali is a kind-hearted and dedicated physician, renowned for his unwavering passion for the diagnosis and treatment of epilepsy. Over the past few years, he has emerged as a true champion for the SCN8A community, particularly through his pioneering research on loss-of-function phenotypes conducted under the esteemed mentorship of Professor Elena Gardella. Dr. Previtali splits his time between a hospital in Milan, Italy, and the Danish Epilepsy Center in Denmark, embodying a global commitment to advancing care and research for individuals living with epilepsy. Before pursuing a career in medicine, Dr. Previtali earned a degree in speech therapy, laying the foundation for his deep understanding of and compassion for children with special needs. Dr. Previtali's unique background and experience fuels his dedication to providing holistic, patient-centered care to his children and families navigating complex neurological conditions. Dr. Previtali's passion, professionalism, and commitment to the epilepsy community make him a deserving recipient of this award. Congratulations. Welcome to our family. Congratulations.
Thank you. It came completely unexpected, so really I don't know what to say. I really thanks Cinzia for the nominees, but of course I have to thank Elena and Rikke for the beautiful job that I did, and I hope that we continue also to do together, and also to all the Dennis Lahl group that collaborate with us. So really, thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.
The Cute Syndrome Foundation's Director of Development and Communication and Lucy's mom, Danielle Hayward, will now present the Family Award.
I am so honored to present this year's Family Award to Kelly Johnston. Kelly joined our community last year after receiving an SCN8A diagnosis for her daughter, May. As so many of us in this room know, receiving an SCN8A diagnosis is life-altering. Even while adjusting to her unexpected new reality, Kelly began to eloquently share her journey with May, offer support to fellow SCN8A families, and ultimately signed on as a TCSF volunteer. Despite the challenges thrown her way, Kelly soon became a powerful advocate for both her daughter and for the SCN8A community. Sadly, Kelly and her husband Corey lost their beautiful May to SCN8A earlier this year. A few months after May passed away, we asked Kelly if she wanted to remain a volunteer. Her answer was an unequivocal yes. Kelly is an exceptional volunteer, driven, reliable, and so committed to this cause. This October, we hosted our second annual All Abilities virtual race with the goal of raising both awareness and funds for SCN8A. Kelly's ideas and organization helped to take this year's event to the next level. Thanks in no small part to her efforts, this year's virtual race had over 200 registered participants around the world and raised over $18,000 for the Cute Syndrome Foundation. In addition to her work behind the scenes with the virtual race, she also rallied her local community to join our mission by hosting an in-person SCN8A walk and run in her hometown of Goshen, New York. Based on participation in her event, I don't think there's a single person left in Goshen who has not heard of SCN8A. We are so grateful for her willingness to share her family's journey, both the beautiful memories and the devastating loss, and engage her community to advance our mission. Thank you, Kelly, for choosing to honor May's legacy through working with the Cute Syndrome Foundation, and congratulations on receiving this year's Family Award.
All right, I could stand up here and tell all of you how much I appreciate you being here with 1,000 different words. But I think we are like 2 minutes before 10, and I think we're gonna call it a night. So I just want to thank you again. And as you guys travel back to your respective homes and to your jobs, and I just would like for you to take a little piece of tonight, a little piece of our community with you, and hold it close, and we will see you again next year. Thank you.